when we hide parts of ourself from others, we don't get to see others accurately either, because they hide too. We hide ourselves from other people who hide, and we share ourselves with other people who share. See, a lot of people think the biggest risk in life is making an error of commission, making a mistake, doing something that led to a bad result. But life is so rich in possibilities. So much is possible for us to experience here. There are so many things we can do that really the greatest risk in living our lives is making an error of omission, is not doing something that would have led to a positive result. It's sort of like the equivalent of not buying the lottery ticket that you knew would win.
Today's guest is a writer, teacher, entrepreneur, explorer of life, experimenter, and spiritual adventurer. He's written more than 1,700 articles about personal growth, and his work has received over 100 million views. He's inspired millions of people to improve their lives and reach for their highest potential. Steve Pavlina, welcome to the James Zander Trip.
Thanks so much, James. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. You've written thousands of articles on your blog about all aspects of personal growth. One of the topics that you've talked about from the very beginning is reality and the nature of reality. Can you tell me how your relationship with reality has changed and evolved over the course of your life?
Yeah, well, I was raised Catholic, so I grew up with a very religious model, but also a very objective model, because my dad was an aerospace engineer. My mom was a college math professor. So very much in a math and science kind of objective model, but then combined with the rigidity of a religious, upbringing too. But the model I was taught was basically like our human lives, we're biological beings, but then there's some kind of, afterlife you go to afterwards, and they're very different phases of existence. And so it's a very common model that many, many people learn. Yet it felt like something is not quite right. It just seemed like there's something about this model that just doesn't feel realistic. Like it doesn't seem very aligned with truth. And so when I was 17, I moved away from that. I considered myself an atheist at the time. And I basically went into a space of exploration for many years, trying to figure out, God, what is this reality I'm in? How does it work? Because I felt like what I was taught growing up just wasn't correct, wasn't accurate.
So when did your explorations begin into other aspects of reality and seeing beyond that original model?
I would say probably something in the range of 20 years ago, where I really got into it. And I really began seriously thinking about, other than just like exploring other belief systems and learning what other people believed. When I really started thinking for myself more, it was probably around 20 years ago.
Was there a catalyst that took you down that road?
Yeah, I got into this idea of just journaling about it and just, asking questions like, how do I think reality really works and what's possible? And then just listening quietly for what answers came back. Either I was channeling from something or just like within my subconscious, just noting what came up. And I found there were really interesting answers and possibilities coming up. Like, what if this is like a dream world of some sort? What if this is more like a simulation? And I think the most interesting part of that was just starting with like, what are the fundamentals? And one of the fundamentals was just, what do I sense right now? What do I see? What do I hear? What can I touch? What do I feel? And as I got into just noticing my perceptions, the one thing that freaked me out a little bit was I realized I can't prove anything beyond my perceptual field exists right now. And I started noticing the difference between truth and assumptions. So an assumption is, say, a city that you're not in right now, not perceiving, that it still exists. It's objectively there and solid. And another strange question I asked is, why am I me? Why is my consciousness attached to this particular body? There's so much symmetry in nature, and yet this is a very asymmetrical thing. Why is there this consciousness and it seems to have this perspective through these eyeballs, but not someone else's? Can you even answer that? Like, why is my consciousness here in this body and not in yours? Why is your consciousness supposedly in your body, not in mine, not in someone else's? How did you get assigned to that body? Like, through what mechanism of reality does that happen? Even objectively, like, it kind of makes sense that either we have a consciousness that is everywhere and like we could see through everyone's eyes all at once. That at least has a certain symmetry to it. Or maybe no one and nothing is conscious. But why is there this individualization of perspective? Like, why is this like a first person game instead of say an overhead view type of, God perspective or no perspective at all? Like, where does that come from? And I searched for answers to that. And I found like there was no objective model answer to that whatsoever. Nothing that seemed convincing or valid. That's where then religions would try to step in and answer, like God created all these different children, but then why am I me? It still doesn't answer why am I me, not someone else.
Yeah, totally. And so that led you down the path of subjective reality.
Yeah, that and other questions.
And other questions, yeah. Can you define subjective reality for the listener, for those who are not familiar with that model?
Yeah, subjective reality is the perspective that we're living in something akin to a dream world or a simulation where we only assume what exists, what is real right now, is what we can perceive within our perceptual field. In other words, it removes the assumption that the world outside of our perceptual field is always running, is always existing as physical matter. And it also basically changes the role of consciousness. It basically says instead of consciousness existing somehow as an epiphenomenon of matter, like it's in our physical brains, the firing of neurons somehow gives rise to the experience of consciousness. And therefore consciousness is localized within our flesh. That's the objective side. On the subjective side, we say, what if it's the other way around? What if consciousness gives rise to the experience within it, including this feeling of having a body, like an avatar, like of matter. So it's very much like having a nighttime dream. When you have a dream and you dream you have a body, is that body in the dream really you? No, because you're the dreamer. You're the being that's asleep having this dream, and all this is just being simulated in your mind. And in your dream, would you assume that your mind is simulating the entire objective universe, including the rest of the planet, all the stars, the galaxies, and so on? And then it's just having you, experience this little corner of it. No, you would probably say, no, why would it do that? It's only simulating what you're perceiving right now, right? You're only dreaming about the perceptions. So what if we, use that same model for this, waking universe, for this waking life? Then it leads to some really interesting questions. Like if consciousness isn't limited to our body and actually extends into perceptual space, then we can actually do things like, I can actually think as if I'm thinking from outside of my body. That's an interesting exercise to try. Do you always think with the perspective that the thoughts are occurring inside your head, inside your brain? Or can you actually think like, hey, my thoughts are filling up the whole room right now? Or this whole space that I'm looking at, it's all thought, because perception is thought too. So if you're looking at something around and you see it, then that's a thought. And is that really occurring in your brain, or is it just occurring all in the space around you?
So basically, the way you describe it is it's all one big dream world, and your consciousness is the whole container for that dream world. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. Now, there's many branches of subjective reality. There's many ways to look at it, many ways to frame it. So that is one. Seeing it as a dream. That's one analogy I like to use. The other analogy that's a favorite is seeing it as a simulation, similar to the Matrix movies, where you're actually, in some kind of simulator. Now, maybe there's even an objective container outside of that, but you're still only experiencing what you can perceive.
Is there a container? Is there an outside of the simulation? And is there an outside of the dream world? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. Here's the truth. We'll never know. Because let's say you wake up from the dream. How do you know you're still not dreaming? Have you ever had a false awakening in a dream? Yeah, lots of people have. I've had that experience where I dreamt that I woke up, but then I dreamt I woke up again. And then finally, maybe I really woke up, or at least so I thought. So if we wake up from the dream world, we still don't know if we're still in a dream. If we die and go to experience an afterlife, we still don't know if that's the end of the dream and now we begin a new phase of existence, or it's the end of our objective life and we begin a new phase of existence, or is it just a continuation of the story? Is it like graduating from high school, where it's just another phase of existence, another phase of life? If it's a simulation could just simulate death. It's like, oh, okay, death is, we just go through a simulated experience of death. So even if you die, lose your physical body, wake up in some kind of spiritual universe, lose your ego, lose your human identity, you still don't know if you're still in a dream, still in a simulation.
Right. Yeah. Isn't that a little freaky?
Yeah. I mean, there are video games that simulate going to an afterlife, and like now you're a ghost or something. There are movies that do that.
So it could be like infinite dreaming, and you never really know if you've ever woken up out of the simulation.
Yeah, that was a freaky thing I realized, is that an objective reality can simulate a subjective one, such as you can go to sleep in an objective reality and you have a dream, but you're really a biological being, but you're asleep and you're having a dream, or you're in a coma and you're having a dream. Another way an objective reality can simulate a subjective one is you build a simulator that's very rich and detailed, and you jack into it in some way. Maybe it wires directly into your brain. And now you're really an objective being in an objective universe, but you've gone inside a subjective sub-universe. And now you're just going through a simulated thing, like a very rich, immersive video game, much like in the Matrix movies, where the people are actually in another objective universe, but they don't realize that they're in a simulated one inside the Matrix because they don't get access to the exits. So what if it's like that? Now, you can also have the exact opposite, where you might be in a subjective universe and it's simulating an objective universe. So that is, say, when you're dreaming, you're in a subjective world, but you're dreaming that the world is objective. You just, like, how often are you fooled when you're dreaming that's real life? A lot, probably.
Pretty much all the time.
Yeah, unless you're doing what's called lucid dreaming. And lucid dreaming is a fun, fascinating thing to explore. That's one of the things that leaned me towards exploring subjective reality too, is when I learned to lucid dream, and I could be conscious in my dreams, maybe for up to 15, 20 minutes. And then to a great extent, I could take control of the dream world. I could fly, teleport, change things, interact with characters differently. And I noticed some very strange things about it, that even when I knew I was dreaming, I could look at objective objects, look at, the dream objects, and I couldn't tell that they were dream objects. I thought, this looks so real, even though I know for certain I'm dreaming right now because I can fly. So I'd fly up into I remember having this dream where I flew up into a maple tree, and I'm just like hovering and I'm looking at the leaves on the tree and examining them. And I say, I know this is not a real leaf. I know I'm just dreaming this right now, but it looks so real. I can feel it. I can touch it. The leaves feel cool, slightly moist. There's veins in the leaves. I thought, this is so rich and detailed, and all this is just being simulated inside my brain. The branches, the grass below, wow, all that's a simulation. And so when I carried that forward into my waking life, I began having that same perspective while awake. Like, this could all be a dream. It could just be as real as when I'm asleep. And what would be the equivalent of trying to become lucid in waking life? And that's when things got really interesting, because then you start thinking, is there a way that I can control the dream somehow, or at least interface with it? And while it wasn't as rich and as lucid dreaming while asleep, stuff started happening.
Like what?
Well, like trying to, speak to the dream world and say, change this, change that, and noticing things started to change. Or just manifesting money. For me, it started, I think it was back around like 2004. I would go running every morning near my house, same neighborhood, always going running, just this loop of like a half hour or so. And most of the time I kept finding pennies on the ground, and so I thought, what's going on here? Why objectively do, like, say maybe 2/3 of the days I go for a run in the morning, why am I finding at least 1 or 2 pennies on the ground? Are people dropping them out of their pockets every day and refreshing the pennies? Or are
refreshing the pennies?
Well, like, where are they coming from? Who keeps dropping pennies? Like, who are these people in the neighborhood that just keeps dropping pennies? This is not a commercial area. It's not a shopping center. This is just houses. So it's just like in the street, okay, or on the sidewalk, another penny. And I kind of got in the habit of picking them up because I was sort of fascinated by it. And I was like, why is that? And then one of the, this was happening for weeks and weeks. And one of these morning runs I did, I asked an interesting question, and it changed the experience of reality for me. And that really freaked me out, because I said, wait a minute, why are people only dropping pennies? Why are there no nickels, dimes, or quarters? Ever. Only pennies. That's all I was finding was pennies. Well, I swear this is true. About 2 minutes later, on that same run, as I kept running, I found a nickel. And I was like, whoa. And then for the next several weeks afterwards, I kept finding pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters on the exact same route that I was running. And I thought, wait a minute, were those there all the time and I was only noticing the pennies? Or did like the simulation, is this reality a simulator? And it suddenly started hearing that request and it simulated those. And then I thought, well, what if I just focus on quarters instead of pennies, nickels, and dimes, you know? And then I started finding mostly quarters everywhere. And I thought, this is really weird. Like I would be running down the street and I'd notice like I'd catch something in a bush and I just knew there was a quarter in there. And I just like look under the bush and sure enough, there's a quarter there. And I'm like, what is going on here? So this went on for weeks and weeks. And then one time I was out on a date with my wife at the time, Erin. We got divorced many years later and I'm remarried now. But I was telling her about this, you know, and she was like, yeah. This, you know, I come home and I'd be like, look, I found 42 cents or 67 cents on my run. And she'd be like, yeah, what's that going to do for our finances? So I was just saying, but don't you see how fascinating this is? How weird this is? How strange this is? And she was a psychic medium. So she was used to the woo-woo space. But she said, all right, you know, if you're going to find a quarter, I'm going to find $1. And I said, okay, I'll intend that with you. We'll find $1. And so we go out through the rest of our date. I know we went out to dinner and probably something else afterwards. And we're walking back to our car. And there, like 8 feet from our car in the parking lot, is $1 bill just lying on the ground. Like nobody else around. We didn't notice it there before. And we're thinking, you know, like, was that bill there before? And one of us just picked it up subconsciously in the corner of our vision and just stayed there the whole time and nobody else picked it up. It was a busy shopping area. Nobody picked it up and just left it there for us. And that's what gave us the idea for the intention. Or did we somehow shift reality and manifest that? And we kept doing more experiments of that nature. And it got weirder and weirder and weirder, where we would our thoughts would start showing up in reality. And we started seeing this connection between what we're thinking and what becomes part of our perceptual field at some point.
Wow. Steve, this is so fascinating. And it sounds like manifestation, but taken to the next level, where you're talking to the dream simulator or the dream, I think you call it controller, right? What do you think in the dream world? Who is the dreamer, actually? And who are you talking to that is responding and reflecting back to you your intentions?
See, that's where I use multiple models. I never really know. Some people call it source. Sometimes I wonder if this really is some kind of simulator. I don't necessarily think it's a perfect godlike intelligence. The more I experiment and play with it, the more I find that whatever intelligence is out there, it's actually extremely human-like. It's flawed. It doesn't listen perfectly all the time. And the most incredible thing about it is it is extremely playful. It has like a wicked sense of humor. It brings things in the most odd and unusual ways, like just surprising. As an example, with this group, I'm running people through this kind of exploration now. And every week we're doing a new intention experiment. We're just on our second week of it right now. But for our first week, we were intending to manifest butterflies, like as what we call an intentional tracer. So our intention was based around good luck, like trying to, let's see if we can manifest a week of extraordinarily good luck, and I wouldn't say people got extraordinary good luck, but people did see incidences of good luck. And then our intentional tracer it's connected with butterflies. So somewhere synchronous in time or space, the idea was when you have good luck, there's an association or connection somewhere in your perception to a butterfly as well. So people were finding butterflies, everywhere. One person actually had a butterfly dive bomb him, like right in his face. And it's like the butterfly just flew up and right in his face. Even people in places where they said there's no butterflies in this area this time of year, there would be something that would come up as a butterfly, a photo of a butterfly, listening to a song and having it mention a butterfly. One person even had a manifestation that you could perceive as a combination of butter and flying.
Amazing.
And so reality just gets like very, very creative with that. Now you can also see, okay, this is human beings like stretching to give reality the benefit of the doubt. But I found that if you loosen up on the objective skepticism about always wanting to explain it away, you get a richer experience too. And there are some incidences where it just doesn't seem like there's an easy explanation, where it somehow showed up through you subconsciously manipulating things to conspire to create a butterfly synchronicity for yourself, or where it's just a coincidence. Like people got so many weird things happening. And here's the really strange part. People who didn't participate in the first week's call, and they didn't know about the experiment, and they didn't know what the intentional tracer was. They didn't know it was a butterfly. On the second call that they finally joined, like these were people that missed the first call, or they listened to the recording of it later. And then on the second call, more than one person shared stories of getting the butterfly syncs, and even in connection with some good luck, before they knew about the experiment.
Wow.
But they were eventually going to be participants. So it's like somehow it rippled outside of the container we created and affected the people who were eventually going to be part of it. Isn't that weird?
It is weird. I've just been thinking, I think a week or two ago, I was seeing some butterflies here in Bali.
Wow.
So this actually makes this is freaky.
So you got to get in there with us and do the experiments too. Because
I got to get in there with you. Yeah. Holy shit. So one thing that I'm curious about is sometimes it feels like the universe is listening to the intentions, and it's a very good flow, and it's responding to them. And other times you put out an intention and there are no butterflies. There's not as much response. What do you make of that?
What I make of that is that every intention is not a command to reality, but it's an offer. It's an invitation. And reality can decline. It can say no. And so the whole game then is figuring out, where does the energy want to flow? Like, where will reality say yes? What kind of offers can I make? What kinds of intentions can I put out that will get a positive response or some kind of response? And where will I just be talking to dead air? And so
every intention is an offer.
Yeah, is one way to see it. And that's why I say reality works much like human beings. When you tell human beings what you want, sometimes they will do what you want. Sometimes they'll do the complete opposite of what you want. And sometimes they'll just ignore you. You could get any kind of response. But the better you get to know the person, the more likely you can get a positive response, or know what kinds of invitations are likely to land well with each person. And then you learn, okay, to these kinds of experiences, I'll invite these people because I know they'll be into that. And I won't invite these other people because I know they won't be into that.
Right.
And so you learn to be kind of selective with your reality too, as you focus on developing a relationship with reality, much like a person. You begin to gather the data, to pay attention to it. That's something we don't do enough when we think too objectively, because we just think the universe is like this cold, not even calculating place, just this cold place. Everybody else is an individual. It's all objects. But we think the universe itself, or reality itself, is just passive. It's like apathetic towards our needs and desires. We don't think of dialoguing with it directly. How often do people just say to the ceiling, here's what I want, here's what my goals are, here's what I'd like to experience? We either don't say anything, or we make the assumption that reality is a mind reader. Like if we just think it inside ourselves, or just think it anywhere, that somehow reality, if it's godlike, is going to pick up on that. But what if it's actually more human-like? Expecting someone that you're in a relationship with on the human level, expecting that they're going to read your mind, that's a problem, because they may not know what you're thinking. They may guess wrong. They may not be that great at reading you. And I think reality is much the same, because I get much better responses when I tell reality. Either speak it aloud, write it down, blog about it, tell it to other people. It's the more I put it out into the world around me, such as by telling people, sharing on a podcast, for instance, is another way to put those ideas out there, the more of a positive response I get. And that's where we run into interesting things, because one of the reasons people only keep their goals, their intentions, their desires inside themselves, and they don't share it with the world, is because of shame, guilt, fear about that. And if they have shame and guilt and fear in having other people hear what they want, they also have that with their relationship with reality. Because the other
Wow.
people are part of the simulation. They're part of the dream world. They're part of reality. So if you have that fear of, I can't share this desire, I can't tell anyone this is what I really want, I can't share this goal, you're withholding it from reality. And so you're telling the simulator, I'm not ready yet. You can't bring me what I want. So that's one thing I found is so powerful, getting past shame and just do the stuff that just okay, this is embarrassing to say this, but I'm just going to say it because it actually is what I want. Or, just say, hey, I'm manifesting quarters right now. And even though that seems dumb and lame, if it's true, just put it out there. Talk to reality. I even tell people, when you don't yell what reality's doing, tell reality, this is stupid. I don't want to be experiencing this. This is lame. I don't want this situation. I don't want this circumstance. I don't want this result. Here's what I want instead. And that actually gets things shifting. It's so strange and weird. Reality especially likes a positive relationship. It likes love. It likes creativity. It loves playfulness.
How do we up-level that relationship with reality? Let's say someone's never developed a relationship with their reality and they think of it as in an abstract, objective way. What is a way that they can start leaning into humanizing that relationship?
I'd say the first step is to acknowledge that the relationship exists. Start with the objective side, if that's easier. So, okay, let's say you are a biological being and you have a brain. How do you think about reality? Where is that stored? Well, it's all modeled inside your brain, right? Your neural patterns create a model of reality, and your other neural patterns interact with that model. That's how you make decisions. You make decisions based on what you can predict, how you predict other people will respond, whether you think your actions will lead to good results or not. And that all gets filtered and processed in connection with your model of reality, how you think that model works. And so when I talk about your relationship with reality, if we look at it through the objective lens, we're talking about how you think in concert with the way you mentally model reality. And so that is an inner relationship. It's a relationship between patches of neurons in your brain. Like this patch has this pattern for how you deal with this person over here. This patch of neurons has a pattern for how you think about your job, your work. This patch has the hobbies in it and so on. But all of that is, it's all a network where everything's interconnected, and in there somewhere is this rich modeling that you create of reality that, say, you've been building since childhood. It includes all the stuff you deal with your senses and how you make decisions, how you set goals, and so on. So if that model has things in it like feeling unsafe here, feeling that everything is so risky, feeling like mistakes and making mistakes is a real big problem for you, that you can't be free to make mistakes, that you can't learn by doing, that you're not free to explore. A lot of these things we learn from growing up, the way we're raised. If your model of reality is very limited, then the problem is you're leaving too much opportunity untapped. See, a lot of people think the biggest risk in life is making an error of commission, making a mistake, doing something that led to a bad result. But life is so rich in possibilities. So much is possible for us to experience here. There are so many things we can do that really the greatest risk in living our lives is making an error of omission, is not doing something that would have led to a positive result. It's sort of like the equivalent of not buying the lottery ticket that you knew would win. And you know what's really weird also? This relates back to the good luck experiment we did. It spills over into the rest of the reality too. Have you seen that that Powerball jackpot? Somebody won I don't know, was it the biggest jackpot in history? One person, during the week we were doing our luck experiment, one person won like $2 billion, someone from California. So I'm like, did we do that? Did we put that into reality? And I saw incidences of like good luck happening to other people around me who weren't even involved in the experiment. Like that's an example of extreme luck. Like somebody won $2 billion buying a lottery ticket. Where did that come from? It's so strange. Was that going to happen? Was that going to happen anyway? I don't know. Maybe you can always switch models. You can always translate everything from the subjective lens to the objective one and back. They never contradict each other. It's like looking through the left eye and looking through the right eye. They just give you different perspectives. But both models are always valid, and you never know which one is true, or if a combination of them is true, or neither is exactly true. But by using both together, you really get some interesting possibilities there. So I don't necessarily recommend to people to only go with the subjective side. Look at things through the objective side as well, because when you just get stuck with kind of a mono lens model, like you're so into objective thinking, you're actually underperforming in how well you can apply the objective side. And what I found, like when I practice the subjective side and then I go back to the objective side, I see so much in the objective model that I missed. Like a simple example with goal setting is when you think too objectively, you're probably not paying enough attention to things like what actually motivates me, what are my strengths, how does my own psychology work? You're almost thinking like yourself as an interchangeable human with everyone else. Like, here's a goal that somebody else did, so I could do the same thing. But you're not personalizing the goal as much. And so that's something I learned when I started setting goals more subjectively, because when you set a goal when you set a goal objectively, you're looking for the objective, like the outcome, the result. When you set a goal subjectively and you're thinking this is a dream world or simulation, the result doesn't matter that much. You're just like, it's all about the experience. It's all about the play, the fun, the joy I'm going to have along the way. So you focus more on the journey than the destination. And so if you focus more on the journey, you pay attention to things like, how fun is this going to be? Is this a journey I really want to take? Is this going to be motivating? Is this going to be exciting? And the thing is that when you set goals like that and you think this would be an adventurous thing to do, you're probably going to pick up a lot of interesting, good, objective outcomes along the way. Like you could, if you do a business and you make it fun and adventurous and it plays to your strengths and you're growing, you're learning, you'll probably get all kinds of achievements objectively along the way, but those are not going to matter as much as just the fun of the journey. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, totally. So if someone has a goal, let's say a financial goal, how do they translate that to the subjective lens? How can we set better subjective goals?
So think of the money as kind of meaningless. It's like playing a video game for the high score. So how would you do it if you wanted to get a high score in a video game? Well, you could focus on getting really good at the video game, right? Like build the skill. So get good at that. So you can think of like, well, what skills do I see in the world that would make money? And what would I want to do enough times that I would get good at it so that I will get the high score, I will get the money. But that's not really my main focus. My main focus is on like playing the game and getting good at it. So I struggled with money, as you know, for a while, trying to make money. And then when I stopped trying to make money and I started trying to have fun, I found that money showed up rather easily without actually trying to earn the money. And even it would just show up like trying to manifest it and such. Like, for instance, I got a book deal, from doing blogging for a few years. Then Hay House, the publisher, came to me and offered me a book deal with an advance. And I never had to submit a proposal to publishers, pitch it to a bunch of people. So my book never got any rejection letters, nothing like that. It didn't even really get an acceptance letter. It was greenlighted before it was even written. It was greenlighted before the project was even conceived. Because the CEO of the company came and said, hey, if you want to do a book, let me know and we'll do it. That's kind of like a shortcut through like using this lens and manifesting. Now that kind of thing can happen in a dream world or a simulation very easily. So it's really all about enlisting the cooperation of reality when you set goals subjectively. So if you find you're chasing money, notice, is it working or not? Like, is the money coming through? Because if not, then it's like reality is saying, no, that's not the way there. Like if you're playing a video game and you're trying to go for a high score and you're not getting the score, does it make sense to keep doing the same approach? No, you gotta realize I suck, or, like I'm playing the game incorrectly, or there's a skill set I'm missing here. You could learn from other players. How did you get a high score? But maybe the way you play it still has to be individualized for you. You have different skills, different reflexes. You may need to play it a bit differently. There's probably a lot of different ways to get to that higher score. So if you get into the point where you fall in love with the game and you start playing it more and more and building skill with it, that's a pathway to getting a better score. And it's much the same with money. So the struggle I had was like trying to make money in a way that didn't feel good. I didn't enjoy making money certain ways. It was stressful, anxiety producing, deadlines that were too tight, working too many hours and so on. And it just had the opposite effect. So instead I thought, what would be the most fun way to make money? how would I really like to make money? If this was a game, what would I want to invest in? And so instead of, say working with other companies and trying to do business deals, I thought that's not something I would do if this was a simulation or a dream world. That's like, Neo at his job before, that's like, what was it? Thomas Anderson was his name, before he becomes Neo. that's like the pre-transformation, version of it. And it's boring. So the post-transformation version then is like, what would be a really fun way to make money? Like, how would I love to get paid? If I was going to bother to earn money in a dream, what would I want to do? And my answer was, I would just do creative stuff. I would do creative projects. I would write, create workshops, events, do things that were social, stretch myself, do things that required courage, do things that were growth experiences. I couldn't make money doing stuff that was dull and boring and plodding. It had to be expansive, fun, growth oriented. And that worked. Then suddenly, now the money comes through. Like it's almost like the universe just conspires to give you money then. Like even if you're not trying to make it, you do something creative, you do something fun. You realize also when you think that way and then you flip it back to the objective side, it makes sense. Don't people like working with businesses or being customers of businesses where the people in the business, they're having fun, they're being creative, they're doing new things? Or do they want to work for businesses that is just like a machine grinding things out?
Yeah.
Like how many people are big fans of like the oil industry? Like, oh, I totally want to buy from them. There's not a lot of passion there on the customer side, even though in the objective universe, they make money, so there's like a lot of models laid out there, but we have to individualize it and explore what actually works for us. We can't just copy something that we see in the simulator.
Mm-hmm. I love that question that you mentioned is like, if I was in a dream, how would I earn money? Because if you're dreaming, you wouldn't even focus on money necessarily. You'd focus on having experiences.
Exactly. And the money would show up in a dream, but you wouldn't really care about that so much. You'd just be like, that's not the point, and you could do so much without money too. You could find ways to have so much fun without money. It's like the money is just part of the background story, but it's not as much of a resource as you might think.
Explain that to me.
Well, people think money is a source of power, and I think that's a big mistake because money's not really a source of power. Creativity is a source of power. And if you have creativity, it can't be taken away. It's not really vulnerable like money is. Money can always be threatened. It's part of the simulation. The game of life could say, I'm going to take away your money. I'm going to send you a financial crisis. It's all gone. And if you see that as a threat, then you're always going to be scared of it. You're always powerless. You can never take risks. And so you will hold back. You'll hold back your creativity. You'll hold back your courage. You'll try to defend and protect your money. But instead, what if your money is like a toy? It's a plaything. But it's not something to get so attached to. An interesting question I asked when I was broke was, could I still have a good life even if I knew, let's say I knew 100% I was going to be broke or in debt my entire human life? Because I struggled for 5 years and that was my reality for 5 years. And I thought, I'm trying to get out of debt and it's not working. I'm trying to get some money coming and it's not working. What if it never works? And I just sort of surrendered to that line of thinking as a thought experiment. Like, what if I never made any money? Do I have to be stressed and anxious my entire life? Like, is that my sentence? And I thought, how ridiculous is that? Like, it's a number in a computer database somewhere. And it's not even the number. It's the minus sign in front of it. All that stress over like 10 pixels, why? I just realized this is so stupid. Like I'm being frustrated by this, this aspect of life that's just so ridiculous.
Why do you suppose that money even exists as part of the dream world? Or why is it part of our dream story? If it seems to distract so many characters in the dream.
Because it's interesting, because it lets us have a relationship with it. It's much like gold or jewels or, in a game world. Why do so many games have scores? Why do so many games have resources? It's part of the interface for life, like food, air, water. I mean, there's so many other things that are resources in the game world, but the key is not to make them a source of power. However, we can do both. We can explore that, like, oh, let me make this a source of power and see what happens, and we can see what that life is like. It's part of the interface, and there's so many different interfaces. There's other people we can connect with. There's clothing we can wear. It's like there's so much possibility out there. Money is just one of many of those things. We can turn it into a huge part of life, and it could be a tremendous source of stress, or we can make it a much smaller part of life.
What would you say are the best sources of power to focus on? Like you mentioned, creativity being one of them.
For me, I'd say the number one is actually the relationship with reality itself, because that's your root relationship with life. So if that relationship is rocky, everything you build upon that is rocky. Everything you build upon that is unstable. How can you have really good, trusting, fun, intimate human relationships if you don't trust reality? If you have, say, trust wounds with life and you just think, oh, something bad's going to happen, I'm going to lose things, like life is against me. What if you have a model that's so objective and you think life doesn't care? Life is totally apathetic. And that's your root thinking about it. Then you think anyone can betray me, anyone can do anything, I can't trust people. But if you trust life, then you can trust in a different way what is within life, what is within reality. If you see the simulator as somehow being purposeful, as, there's maybe a reason I'm here. Now, you don't know that for sure, but you can lean into exploring those thought patterns. You can test it. I tell people you don't have to believe anything. You just test it. You just test ideas. You don't have to believe in manifesting to try it. You could just say, let me just talk to the ceiling and ask for something. You don't have to believe it's going to work to say it, just as you don't have to believe in a car to drive it. All you got to do is, use the accelerator, turn the key, turn it on, turn the wheel, do the interface, and it will drive. You don't have to believe in driving. You don't have to study the science of it. You don't have to convince yourself that this will work. You just drive. And so subjective reality is the same way. You just drive it. Just try it. Try it on for size. And when you start seeing it working, then it gives you a little more confidence. Just as you learn to drive a car, you go, okay, I'm starting to see the patterns here. I get how I can use it. I get how I should not use it. And I still don't need to believe in it. But you can actually have confidence in the interface. Does that make sense?
Totally. So it's like learning how to park, learning how to
parallel parking,
park reality.
yeah. Learning how to park and drive reality, and kind of invited to go places with you.
Mm-hmm. Totally. What do you think is a good way to up-level our relationship with reality?
First, acknowledge that it's there, and also acknowledge if this is a relationship partner that you have, how good of a relationship partner have you been? And most people, when I ask people this, they often say things, if reality were like a human being, how would it think of me as its relationship partner? And many people would say things like, well, it would probably think I've been ignoring it for a long time. I haven't talked to it. I haven't praised it. I only ask it for things at best, demand things of it. I never tell it, I thank you. I never give it any appreciation. I never marvel at how amazing it is. And so if you're in a human relationship like that, think of how lousy of a relationship partner you've been. That's where you start with upgrading. And so one of the best places to upgrade is just start saying thank you. Start saying thank you for the small things. That's what was really transformational for me when I was broke, is I just started saying thank you for the sky. Thank you for the sunrise. Thank you for the beach. Thank you for a book I can read. Thank you for libraries that make books free. Thank you for all that I get to enjoy in life. Thank you for music. Especially start saying thank you for things that you feel have some semi-permanence to them, like you get to experience and enjoy them all throughout your life. You don't have to worry about them being yanked away. And starting with that and just basically saying, thanks life. Thanks for all these good things. Thanks for my body. Thanks for air to breathe. Thanks for food. Thanks for water. Thanks for these experiences that I've had. And then there's another phase where you can go to, I call this extraordinary gratitude, which is where you start thanking life for your challenges, for your setbacks, for your hardships, for your growth experiences. Thank you for the broken bone. Even getting to the point where you can say something like, thank you for cancer. And many people, I've known people who have gotten cancer and they've gone through it, either, treatments for it and recovered. My best friend from high school, he actually just texted me out of the blue, just like an hour before we started this recording. And he had, cancer in high school and like 19 surgeries, and yet he's one of the people I know who just he has this joy for life, this appreciation of it. And, imagine just like, having to go through an experience of fighting for your survival in high school and missing a year of school. And he would have graduated in the year before me, but he ended up being in my class, and we became best friends.
So you think maybe the goal is to be able to thank for every experience that we have, even the hardest ones?
Yeah. Now, you probably can't do that while you're in the thick of it, while you're going through it. Not necessarily that reasonable to suggest that to people. But so many things I found and other people have found, when you look back on them, say 5 years later, 10 years later, then you start to see how it actually served you. And so if you can start noticing that pattern when you look to your past, can you do that? Can you look upon your past and see things 5 years ago, 10 years ago? That was not such a great situation. It was a hardship, but actually I see it as being more purposeful with, the benefit of hindsight. I see how it helped me grow. I see how it took me down a different direction, even though it might have been difficult or painful. Once the immediacy of the pain or the difficulty recedes a bit and you have the benefit of hindsight, usually people's perceptions will soften a bit, and they might even soften enough to actually appreciate those hardships. I know people who've gone through divorces and bankruptcy. I've gone through both myself. And even though it's difficult to go through those experiences, I look back on them with appreciation. I still love and appreciate my first wife. I still look back on my bankruptcy as one of the best things that happened to me, even though it was more than 20 years ago. It was such a powerful learning experience. It was like a big wake-up call. But at the time, no, resistance, anxiety, stress. So if you know that, though, when you look in the past, then you could start to take that perspective looking forward to the future. So when you start going through something that is a difficult experience, you can begin to have more of that access to that perspective that says, this is probably a good experience. It's probably going to serve me. It might be a little difficult going through it, but maybe I can try applying some of that softening perspective of hindsight right now, because I know that's likely how I'm going to feel 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Why do I have to create the stress while I'm going through it? Is that really necessary? So you can notice that it's not the experiences themselves that create stress and anxiety and fear. It's your perspective. It's how you're relating to it. It's that you see it as a threat. But if you start realizing these experiences that happen to you in life, they're actually growth experiences, they're lessons, they're offers from reality, nothing is really meant as a threat. And even when it seems like it's a threat, it's not really meant that way.
What about like really tough experiences, like people going through violence or something like sexual assault? Like, how does one make peace with something that feels so horrific and find extraordinary gratitude for it?
I heard an interesting expression this weekend. Breathe in judgment, breathe out compassion. I kind of like that. It's like, go ahead and judge it, go ahead and label it, but then also see it as a perspective like everybody's here to learn and grow, and people make mistakes. And you could even say, hey, maybe reality makes mistakes too. Maybe it's more human-like than we realize. And so having some compassion for it, being able to practice forgiveness, and trying to find one little shred of goodness in the experience. Like, I've known people who've had a lot of hardships happen to them. There was a woman I knew in Vegas. She grew up in I think it was Lebanon, and while she was in her apartment, I think she had walked into her kitchen, and right as she walked into that room, a bomb flew in her window, blew up, and killed her brother. And she survived, but had she been in the room for another second or two, she might have died too. And, I've known people just like having lots and lots of hardships and terrible stories. And she became a motivational speaker and began talking about this and sharing this experience. And that's one of the ways I found that really transforms those painful experiences in a powerful way, is actually turn around and share it. Teach it to people. Find out, how can I transmute this into something good that can benefit others? You don't have to keep it so bottled up inside. How many people have lost loved ones and things, and yet they turn it into a source of strength. They try to move it outwardly. They try to create some transformation in the world. They try to find meaning in it. And that's a choice. We can make the meaning like, this was painful. This shouldn't have happened to me. This was abuse. Or we can say, I'm going to change the meaning. I'm going to assign the meaning that this is an invitation of some sort to grow, or to share, or to transform, or to comfort other people. If you've gone through a painful experience, do you realize how many hundreds or thousands or even millions of people who've probably had something similar, if not in the details, then at least emotionally, energetically, they've gone through something similar. And do you know how much comfort you could give to them? Tons.
Wow. Yeah, you're making me think that I should probably share more of my stories and experiences of things I've gone through, because I do keep things bottled up a little bit, especially the hard ones, because I think part of it is the shame, as you mentioned before. There's especially certain mistakes I've made in life. You feel shame, like, oh, I could have done better, or I could have chosen differently. I could have, especially when you take responsibility for it, you're like, oh, I caused this and that was dumb or that was stupid. And coming to terms with that, like how would you say is a good way to release shame around an experience and transform it into something positive?
Lean into it slowly, into it gradually. Like, it can be too much to share all at once. But you can write books about it. There's a guy named Dave Pelzer who wrote, books about his incredibly abusive childhood. I remember reading his book, A Child Called It, and I think another one was The Lost Boy, and then A Man Named Dave. And, he has several books about, the experiences he went through as a child. It's just incredible abuse. And you're just like, oh, how could somebody have to go through that? But yet, he started with one book, maybe one page, writing it. And maybe I don't know his whole story, but maybe he started earlier, sharing it in some other way. What you can do is take a minor shame and lean into that and share that and see what happens. And I can tell you from experience, I've had shameful experiences from my past, like, when I was 18, 19 years old, I got arrested 4 times in 18 months for shoplifting. And, the last time was for felony grand theft. I almost had to go to state prison for a little bit, but got off with community service. And I hadn't shared that story publicly when I started blogging in 2004. But then the following year, I think it was 2005, I finally decided I'm going to share this story. Now, it wasn't a secret among people who knew me, but it's not like I put it on the internet out to the whole world. And I thought, if I do that, I can never really take it back. And so, I decided to write this series about it, where I shared that story in the first post. And it was a series called The Meaning of Life. It was about finding meaning in events and such. And I remember when I wrote that, I wrote it all up. I said, I'm just going to write it first and then see how I feel. And I was like, wow, man, do I publish this now? I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know. I was kind of nervous about it. I was like, if I do this, I can never really take it back. It's like the cat's out of the bag, and what effect is that going to have? And then I thought, I'm just going to do it. And I was like clicking the publish button like this with my eyes closed. Like, okay. And it was remarkable what happened. Like, nobody judged me for it. It was just the opposite. Everybody was like, excuse me, it's just a little emotional, thinking about it. But I remember there was one young guy who emailed me, and he said he really appreciated that story because he was going through something similar in his life right now. And my story gave him hope that he could get past it. And that was, it's just a lot of, encouragement, and people just surprised with the level of courage. It was like it transformed my relationship with that part of my past too, because that was a part I always pushed down and buried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I realized all that pain becomes a source of connection when you share it.
Yeah. And to see that other people benefit from hearing your story.
Yeah.
Why do you think we feel shame in the first place? Like, what is at the root of shame and guilt?
I think it's a way we're just still processing through the experience. And I think in a way it's a bit of a false perspective. I think so much of the shame and the fear of guilt comes from a bit of an illusion that we're all separate, And what I found is that when we hide parts of ourself from others, we don't get to see others accurately either, because they hide too. We hide ourselves from other people who hide. And we share ourselves with other people who share. And I've just, through all the numbers of people I've connected with and are related to, I just find myself doing that too. When people are open with me, I'm very open with them. When I'm very open with people, they open up to me. If I'm closed with people, they're closed with me. When we share our image, our public image with each other, the false image, the image we want the world to see, the sanitized image. When we share that with each other, that's what we get to see from other people. And it's kind of a cold and distanced way of connecting with people. We're not really connecting with them. But when we start realizing, like, nobody's perfect. Everybody's got messed up stuff in their past and probably in their present too. And we just start shamelessly sharing that. It becomes like even playfully so. And I've had the experience of being able to playfully share experiences like that with people. It's just so, so different. It's like people just open up and they laugh about it. I especially notice this with my, I have a lot of friends in their 70s and 80s, and I have friends in their 20s and 30s. And it's like, as people get older, it's so fascinating just how much, if they really work on themselves, they can lighten up with the shame. Like body image is one of those things. Someone was telling me, like about a group of women that went out somewhere, and I think they all went swimming someplace naked, and then they were talking about their bodies, and so they're asking, like, what do you like about they're asking all the women there, what do you name 10 things you like about your body. And they're finding the younger women had a really hard time with that. They dislike their bodies. And the older women, who's, maybe from a certain perspective, their bodies were not as fit, and they probably had a lot more flaws, they found way more things to love about their bodies. They were actually happier with their bodies than the younger people. It's really interesting.
Why do you think
they had let go of because they had let go of the shame. They just started realizing it's so pointless after a while. And I think one of the reasons that reality may work this way is appreciation. We get that appreciation through contrast. When we don't like our bodies and we learn to like our bodies, we learn to appreciate them even more. When we have scarcity and then we get to experience abundance, then we don't take abundance for granted. We really do appreciate it more.
Yeah.
So it's like a way of through that contrast, we create more appreciation.
Mm-hmm. Was there an experience in your life that was hard to feel extraordinary gratitude initially, but then you managed to reframe it in such a way that it became a source of strength or a source of power?
Yeah. A number of them. Getting kicked out of school was one. Getting kicked out of college. That was when I was going through my shoplifting phase and doing a lot of that stuff. And, getting kicked out there, that was, an issue for sure. But then I began to see it as like an invitation to do education differently. And I eventually went back to school, and then I was able to get two 4-year degrees in 3 semesters by going through it super fast because I did it my way. I realized I can't follow the rules academically. I can't follow the script that's prescribed for me. I can't do things the way I'm, quote, supposed to do. I have to find my way of doing things in life. And so it allowed me to just interface with more choice and creativity.
Mm-hmm. When you look at your dream world, are there things that don't make sense to you? As in, like, if you look at certain suffering going on in the world, do you go, I wonder why that's happening in my dream world? Or does it all sort of fit into your model?
No, I pretty much find there's multiple explanations for it. There's always different ways to look at it. And even at different times in life, I can adopt different perspectives, different lenses. Looking at suffering in the world, you can say, well, that's an invitation to compassion. It's an invitation to care. It's, it's thinking about service. It's also noticing, okay, there's, people experiencing disconnection in life, and there's people experiencing tremendous connection in life. It helps, it helps to have that variety of possibility. I see reality as being very generous in what freedoms it allows us. How much freedom and flexibility we have. It's not so limited and constrained. And so we can create violence. We can create disconnection. We can create pain and punishment and so on. We can do all of that. It's all part of the possibility space. It's like life is branching out in all different directions, saying, let's explore this, let's explore that. I see life as a consummate explorer. It just wants to go and dive in and touch everything, try all the possibilities, including all the possibilities for humans to connect or not connect with each other and relate. And so I sort of respect that on a certain level. I think, okay, I get that. It's exploring, it's trying. It wants to feel and touch everything, all the possibilities out there, and reach into that, because it's like learning through the experience. It's growing through the experience. All that is, part of the richness of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What were some of the most mind-blowing experiments or woo-woo mystical things that you've experienced where you kind of went, wow, is this possible in reality? And like your perception of reality changed after that.
Well, one was just continuing with that manifestation experiment with manifesting money. So Aaron and I, after we manifested that dollar, we went on another date, maybe a few weeks later or something like that. And we did something else, and we said we live in Las Vegas, so we went down to the MGM Grand on the Strip, and we were there walking around the space, and we decided let's try to manifest a free black casino chip, which is worth $100. Not belonging to anybody, just something that we could just have. And so at this point, we were still in the phase of picking up coins when we would see them. And as we were going on the date, we ended up picking up like 2 quarters and 2 pennies. So it's like, okay, we're up to 52 cents, kind of a long ways away, but something's happening. And then we're kind of giving up because we were leaving the casino. We were walking back through this row of shops back to the parking lot. And we're like, well, we're out of the casino. We're probably not going to find it now. Oh, well, so it didn't work. So, but then at one point, Aaron notices a penny and goes to pick it up. And I notice a penny maybe like 10 feet away from in a different direction. And I go pick it up. So we both pick up these pennies at the same time. And as I look up, I notice right in front of me is this gift shop, and it's got this bin filled with souvenir black casino chips. They're not the real ones that they use in the casino. They're like, cheap ones they sell to the tourists as little souvenirs. So I thought, oh no, I asked for a real one. But then I thought, that's kind of funny, silly, playful. So I'm going to go buy one just to commemorate the experience, just to remember this, this little manifestation test. And so I grab one and I stand in line, and it rings up as costing 50 cents plus tax, which came out to 54 cents, which was exactly the 52 cents we picked up earlier and the 2 pennies we just got. So I thought, wow, that's really weird. It gave us exact change to buy this little thing. But then at that point, I thought, do we have to actually go out somewhere into reality to find money? Like, it could send us money in the mail or some other way. Can't we just talk to the ceiling and say, bring me money? So that's what I leaned into next. And so I said to the ceiling, you know what? Bring me $100. Just bring it. And then within like a few days, I got $40 through one mechanism that involved my Toastmasters club. And then I think it was like a $70 or $75 rebate from the Department of Motor Vehicles here in Nevada, because back at the time they had a surplus of money, the state, and so they decided to give everybody who had a car registered in the state a little refund. It's like free money from the government that I didn't know was coming, and so it was not exactly $100. It was like 110, 115, but I was like, okay, well, was that money going to come anyway? So then I thought, all right, I'm going to ask for $1,000 now. And so I said, reality, bring me $1,000. And then within a few days, I get a new advertiser signs up and buys an advertising package on my blog for $1,050. And it was a package I would sell maybe once every 6 months. So I'm like, all right, maybe a coincidence. All right, bring me $10,000. Let's see if that works. And I was just sort of playful and having fun with it. And then within the next week, I get an email from my mom, and what turned out was my grandparents, who died years before, they both died within a year of each other, but their estate, their inheritance was finally settled, and my parents inherited some money, and they decided to give me and each of my siblings $10,000 exactly. And so within like days after I got that email, I had a check for $10,000. Now I feel really good, I guess, in a way that my grandparents had already passed away, because I would have felt really like bad and freaked out if they had suddenly died because,
Totally.
there was all this attention. So at least that wasn't part of it. But I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know this was coming. I didn't know there was anything. So I thought that had been settled years ago, and, but no. So I thought that's a little weird. But then at that point, I started getting a little freaked out, because I was like, this is working, and why? Why is this working? And it's like too close to the amounts I'm asking for when I'm asking for it. How, is reality really subjective in this way? So the next intention I set wasn't as congruent. I was a little more scared of it. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to work. So I said, all right, bring me like $50,000 to $100,000. Bring me something in that range. And what ended up happening is I wasn't really sure if I wanted that to happen, because then where do you take that if you start realizing this is too much like a dream world or simulation? It blows your mind so much. It's like your mind can't handle it. So And at the same time, while I was doing these experiments leading up to this, my regular income quadrupled. So it was like more money was just coming in and I didn't even need the extra money. So I was like, I don't even need it per se. I'm not even sure if I 100% wanted to show up. But in hindsight, I figured this out later. What ended up happening is I ended up getting like $50,000 because that was my advance for my book publishing deal. And that came about 7 months after I set the intention. So it took way longer, but it still somehow came through, and it seemed eerie. And when I realized, oh, that kind of matched what I asked for, but it was like big delay there. So after that point, I didn't experiment with money as much. I began experimenting in other ways and just trying to do like, manifesting other kinds of experiential things. Like I eventually got to go to Europe. I've been to Europe 6 times, but I only paid for the trip once because the other 5 were just like free trips there, like a speaking invitation or something. So I began trying to lean into that. And one of my favorite ones was just manifesting Rochelle, who's my current wife. We got married in 2018. And the way she showed up was like, I pictured the kind of woman I wanted to have a relationship with. And this is as when it was getting to the point of Aaron and I separating. And Rochelle showed up in my life when we started getting involved. A few months after that, marriage, after Aaron and I separated. And it was interesting because Rochelle had asked for a relationship too. And what she was asking for was basically me. And what I was asking for was her. And the way we did it was, I don't know all the details of what she did. I know she made a list of what she wanted in a partner, but the way I did it was I visualized the experiences I wanted to have with a woman. Like I remember one of them was imagining holding hands with a woman walking across a bridge in Europe, like over a river there, because then that experience, that's like it encapsulates the feeling of romance and connection and travel. Wanted somebody who was very travel adventurous. And, throughout our relationship, Rochelle and I have walked across many bridges in Europe in many different cities. It was just like one small part of the experience, but I found that creating a visual for it is really helpful. A visual where you feel something, where you feel some emotion, you feel the vibes of the experience, you feel the energy of the experience, and then basically let reality fill in the details. So don't go super specific in asking for a particular woman or getting really attached to the outcome there. Focus on the experience. So it's more of like subjective goal setting. It's not about the person showing up in your life. It's about looking past that. What are you actually going to do together? What are you going to experience together? Why do you want this relationship? I think some people get so attached to the front edge of a goal. Like, I just want this person to show up in my life. I want this job to show up. I want the money to show up. But you got to think past that. And what are you going to do with the person? What are you going to do with the job? What are you going to do with the money? Where's the experiential aspect? It's like getting all excited about a video game, but you don't even think about playing it. Mm-hmm. I just want to buy the game. Yeah, but are you going to play it? Are you going to have fun with it? Is that going to be the motivation, just to have the possession? No, you're probably going to think past it and about the fun.
It reminds me of this author, Neville Goddard. He talks about how when you visualize things, visualize the scene right after that you've manifested something. So like if it's like a handshake with someone who signed a deal with you, or like telling your friends that you got something. So it's like, instead of the actual event happening, it's the scene right after. Kind of ties into what you're saying as well, of exploring that a little bit further than just the actual manifestation of something.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that.
Do you recommend a specific visualization or process that you do? Because, for example, with the money, it seems like you just set it to the universe once and it happened. With other things, do you find that you have to constantly renew the vision, make it a daily practice? Can you talk to me about like the difference in the approach?
I've seen both approaches work, where I will visualize it many times for several days or even weeks, or where I just imagine it once. I think the reason to practice it multiple days is to really get clarity about what will it really feel like to be there. But if it's something where I'm pretty clear about what it's going to feel like to be there, I can just do it once, like once ever, and that can still work. So sometimes you have to play around with the visuals to really get clear about what you're asking for. I find that a mistake most people make is they don't ask for enough. They are asking for one small facet of an experience, but they're not looking at like what it will really be like. They're not asking for the emotional side, so or the mental aspect of it. Maybe they're just focused on, okay, this is the physicality of it. For instance, if people think about making a certain amount of money, they may just think about the numbers, the money. But are they thinking about what will it really feel like to have that money? Like, do you know what it will feel like? And probably you don't. Like let's say 10 times more money shows up in your life. Do you know what it will feel like if that actually happened? You may know what it feels like to wish for it, but do you have a good clear idea of what would that really feel like if you were there? Because I can tell you, as I've made more money, the way it feels when it shows up is different than I thought it would be. It's
in what ways?
It's not exactly how I imagined it. Well, you think in advance that it's going to be extraordinary, but then when you have it show up and you get used to it, it feels like it's just another layer of normal. It just becomes your new normal. It's like when you go to a new school, it feels strange and different at first, but then after several weeks, it feels like, okay, this is my school. This is normal. So I tell people, you'll probably get a better sense of how to visualize it if you think maybe even a year or two past being there. So imagine what it will feel like when you're used to it, not when it just shows up. So you want a new relationship partner. Imagine what it'll feel like, not when this person just shows up, but when you're used to them, when you're already in the relationship. How will you relate to each other then? Visualize that. Imagine that.
Wow. Yeah, I love that.
Having those kinds of experiences. When the money shows up, imagine like how you'll be when you're comfortable with it, when it's normal for you, because then you have to change a bit in yourself too. You have to change how you're going to relate to money. You can't be saying, "Oh my gosh, this is so incredible. It's so much money. I feel so rich and so wealthy." How long is that going to last? Are you going to do that for weeks and weeks and weeks? Probably not. Probably at some point you'll be like, "Okay, that's enough of that. Now, let's just chill and okay, this is my reality." Okay, this is normal now. I can get used to this. Maybe you like it still, but it's got to become your new normal.
Mm-hmm. So it's tuning into that vibe and making it feel normalized. And there's still a vibe difference, though, between not having the money and having the money. But it's maybe more subtle than people make it out to be, of this like exciting thing.
Yeah, like I could say when you have plenty of money, you don't have to think about money as much. And you probably are not thinking enough about enough parts of it. For instance, think about how it will feel like to pay bills. When I was broke, paying bills was a stressful experience. I didn't like it. It felt annoying. And I was always like, oh, now my bank account's down to this. You feel that. But when you have plenty of money and you pay bills, it's kind of like easy, even fun. Like you'll pay your bills early even. Like I don't have to wait till last minute to pay bills. I'm just going to pay them when they arrive, or just set on everything on auto pay because there's always plenty of money in the account. You don't have to check your bank account as often if you don't want to. It's like, oh, I always know there's plenty in there, so I don't really have to worry about it. So it's, in some cases, it can be the removal of worry or the removal of anxiety or stress, and it kind of replaces it with a more neutral feeling, like relaxed and chill and calm. It's not like you're going to be super excited about having money because, with all the other things you can experience in life, money is relatively boring. When you have plenty, it becomes a much bigger part of your life when you feel you don't have enough. So if like my approach to creating more financial abundance was actually to want to have a relationship with money where I didn't think about it as much, where I just sort of saw myself as having a positive and healthy relationship with money, but not something I need to obsess over. It's kind of like having a relationship with a refrigerator. Yeah, it's great. It keeps your food cold. It's nice, but you can kind of just trust that it's there for you when you need it. You don't always have to be thinking, oh, please keep the food cold. Please don't heat up. Please don't break on me. You just it's a fridge. It just sits there. It does its job. So it's kind of like with money, you create that more neutral relationship. But if you had a broken fridge, you might have that stress and stuff. So you might want to think to the visualization of and the feeling of, let's remove the stress. Let's just replace it with a chill and calm, maybe even neutral feeling. And that actually can be more accurate and help it show up versus thinking of, this is my savior, if this shows up.
Right, totally. Yeah. Because when you talk about it, it all makes complete sense. But for someone who's maybe going through a scarcity situation, it's hard for them to disconnect from the present moment stress in their life and actually tune into that feeling of neutrality.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Is there something that helped you in that path to really, in the middle of the stress, to just switch your mind and start tuning into the vibe of abundance?
to keep reminding myself that the stress was pointless. There was actually no point. It wasn't helping. And that the stress was not because of the event. It was about the framing. And that there are other people that went through ups and downs financially, and they were okay. And when I realized, like, I could go broke, I could go bankrupt. I got kicked out of my apartment before because I couldn't pay the rent, and I was still okay. And when I realized, a lot of stuff can happen to me in life, and I'll be okay. When I realized I could cope.
Right.
Like I feel that way today. I feel like the most important lesson was not trying to attract money. It was getting rid of the fear and the resistance to being broke. That's what created the transformation. When I dropped the resistance to being broke, it was actually just saying to myself, look, I'm just going to be broke for a while, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to stop fighting it. I'm just going to surrender to it. Because when you surrender to an experience and you stop resisting it, then you can play with it. Then you can say, all right, what can I do as a broke person? That's fun. Hey, I can go for a run along the beach. I got into distance running when I was broke. It's free. Go run along the beach.
Yeah. And not giving away your power to money as the thing that will change your state or your vibe.
Yep. I know plenty of wealthy people, including, millionaires, and some of them are pretty miserable, and some of them are quite happy. And it's not really about the money.
The ones who are miserable, what do you think they haven't gotten about reality or about their relationship with reality?
It's the same thing that people with, brokenness haven't gotten. It's like they create stress for themselves. They frame the situation as like, I don't have enough. People can have millions of dollars and think, I'm inadequate. I don't have enough. Or I'm not as wealthy as I was in the past. Or I should be further ahead by now. It's all the thoughts that create that disconnect with reality. What they're not doing is appreciation. They're not taking the time for enough gratitude and thinking how wonderful this would be. Imagine how sucky it is to get wealthy and, say have millions of dollars, and you don't even appreciate it. And you're still stressed and you're still worried about money. That would be terrible. And yet you can learn this when you're broke. When you're broke, you can basically say, hey, I'm going to make a positive, relationship with brokenness. And then you can carry that forward when you have more. When you're alone, you can make a positive relationship with aloneness. You could just love your alone time and not have a relationship partner. And you know what? That is going to be more attractive to a relationship partner, a person like that, than a person who's like, I need. I'm so alone. I'm so lonely. I'm so disconnected. That's going to be repulsive to relationship partners. They're like, I don't want to connect with this needy person. I don't want somebody really clingy. They'll probably be wanting to connect with the person who's more chill in their aloneness. It's odd how that works, but the neediness is repulsive. It's repulsive to money. It's repulsive to people. So I think a key to making progress here is to admit to ourselves that certain things just aren't working and that we ought to stop doing them. So I ask myself, after doing 5 years of anxiety and stress, trying to make money and not having it work, I ask myself, do I want to enroll in another 5 years of that? That's a good question to ask yourself. So whatever's not working for you, ask yourself that. Do you want to enroll in another 5 or 10 years from that? How long do you want to keep doing that? Another 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? How long will it take to get that out of your system till you feel you are complete? It sounds like a silly question, but I actually mean it seriously. Because when you start thinking, if I've done that in the past, I'm just going to carry that habit in the future unless I change. And do you want that? And when you start looking at it as a choice, because you don't actually have to do that, then a lot of people are going to say, no, I don't want that.
I think the key you're highlighting here is that just because you have a certain experience doesn't mean you have to apply negative meaning to it and stressful meaning, and that there's always a choice to be made.
Yeah, you can be your own spin doctor, essentially. There's always a way to spin it where you look at the growth experience. I ask questions like, what can I appreciate about this? Or how will I look on this 5 or 10 years from now? Then I think, can I start doing that now? Because why not? Why do you have to wait 5 or 10 years to heal when you don't have to perceive it as an injury in the first place?
Ooh, that's interesting.
Why create the wound if you're going to heal from it anyway? Why not just skip ahead to the healing part where you're already healed? So it's like pre-heal. It's like a cheat code.
Can you give me an example of like a trust wound that you just switched the framing of it and then it became not an issue at all? Like, because that seems such an interesting perspective that you just shared, but kind of abstract to me at this moment.
Like going through a divorce. I feel like, in going through my divorce with Aaron, I don't feel like I incurred a trust wound, particularly much there. I just felt like as one friend described it, I really like this phrase. She said, "You completed your marriage." I thought that's a beautiful way of looking at it. We finished. we're it's not like a divorce is a terrible thing, a breakup and a separation. I know many people who've been divorced and remarried, including some multiple times. And I don't know, it's just there's something beautiful about having multiple life partners that we go through, like whether you're married or not, just like multiple relationships, people learn and grow through all of them. And I know some people who've gone through terribly bitter divorces, people who've spent tons and tons of money on the divorce, lawyers and a lot of contentious stuff dragging on for a decade or more even.
Wow.
And I feel lucky that I didn't go through that experience, but I had the option to. It was possible, to make it terrible. But I just, when I just kind of looked at the perspective of like, I don't mean any ill will towards Aaron, but also I'm going to make sure that I go through this in a healthy and positive way. And you know how much, other than like child support and stuff, how much the divorce cost me in legal fees? $100. That was it. Aaron had a lawyer who drafted the paperwork and I paid a lawyer to review it. And that was it. $100 to review the paperwork and basically say, okay, it's all right. It made us a few suggestions and stuff. I think we made some tweaks based on that, but all pretty minor. So, that's not a lot of trust wound.
So it started with the framing of actually making like the intention of, I'm not going to have a hard time with this. This is going to be easy. It's going to be smooth and flowing.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, if you have to pay child support or alimony, you can resist that too. Or you can just say, hey, it's just money. I can earn more. Now it's an invitation to be more creative. Great. There's plenty of money.
Yeah. I'd love to ask you about some of your mystical experiences with, for example, I know you've done some astral projection, and I'm curious how that impacted your view of reality and how it shaped your thoughts about the nature of reality.
Yeah, when I did astral projection, my ex-wife was really into that. And so I didn't so much learn to do it consciously like some people can do. But as I read some books about it, and then I started having some astral experiences, but they would just sort of happen. It would start like while I was sleeping or dreaming. And then sometimes even from a lucid dream, I would switch into an astral state. And the difference was like with an astral state, it feels like you're in something very similar to your physical space, like you're in your own bedroom or something. And at least that's how it would show up for me. Except it feels it's almost like you're perceiving everything around you as energy, like the walls are made of energy, and you can potentially pass through them and such. So it was kind of almost like a model of the physical universe, but on an energetic plane of some sort. That's how it showed up for me. But then, pretty much all my astral experiences were not so great. They were very dark, like dark entities, scary things coming to me. And I would just be like, I want to wake up from it. And I try to like struggle to get out of it, feeling things like kind of pressing in on me or oppressing me. Yeah, it was like being in a horror movie sometimes. So I generally just wanted to wake up from that. But it also gave me like, okay, there's another layer, like there's other layers of reality, possibly other dimensions. At least that was a perception. Now I can also say, all right, that was some other weird kind of dream, but it felt very different than a regular dream. It felt different than lucid dreaming. The perceptions were shifted, and it was pretty consistent. When it was astral, it was a certain range of experience. When it was lucid dreaming, it was a different kind of range. When it was like non-lucid dreaming, is a different kind of range. And when it was waking reality, still a different kind of range.
So for like the skeptics who think that like an out-of-body experience is just dreaming, you're saying the qualia is very different between those two experiences.
It is. Like I just would never mix them up, at least from my own experience. Like I always have a pretty crisp label for what was what. So
from a subjective reality standpoint, who are those negative entities that you met?
I would say it's just like reality saying, hey, there's a lot out there in the possibility space. And what you are experiencing is just a narrow range. Like what you call your waking reality, there's so much more that's possible out there. Things could go really good. They could go really dark. There's more conscious experiences that are possible. It's something I learned with lucid dreaming. There's other layers to it. So I just saw it's kind of like, like a multiverse out there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How do we expand the possibility space of our reality container?
Well, one is choosing to. Like this week in our group, we're doing this experiment to step beyond limitations, to move past old limitations, to invite reality. You could actually just ask reality. One of the intentions I love to say is, show me something that I've never seen before, or show me something that will blow my mind, or show me how reality really works. Show me something new about how reality works that I didn't know before. So invite that. Invite a willingness to see beyond previous limitations, and then see what happens. And the more you practice this, the more you start seeing that effect take place.
So just asking reality, show me something mind-blowing, show me something mystical, something woo-woo.
Yep. You can also lean in with action, do things you've never done before. So whenever I want to explore more, I tell reality that. And then what pretty much always happens is I start getting more invitations from people. Like it's like opening up your energy field and saying, I am open to more experiences. You know how you can feel socially closed sometimes? Like, I just don't feel like connecting with people. You know, people ask you to go out or something. And like, I don't really feel like it. I just want to stay home and watch Netflix. And, I'm kind of just want to be in my own space. But then have you ever had the experience of like, I just feel really social right now. I just want to open up and share and connect. And, maybe it's because you had a social experience already, like you went to a conference or something and you made a lot of good friends there and just feeling super social. Now, do you also notice that people and reality respond to you differently when you're in both those modes? Like maybe when you're in your compressed, individualized state, fewer invitations come through. I notice that when I'm feeling super social, like I've had a super social experience, more people reach out to me. I've noticed like if I do a workshop, because as you know, I've done some workshops like say like on the Las Vegas Strip. And then if I go around and walk around that evening after I've been in front of an audience, or the next day, even if I'm not trying to, other people are more social with me. Like I'll be going grocery shopping or something, and the cashier seems extra flirty with me. It's like people just reach out to me, or I start getting more emails from people who want to meet up. Old friends reach out to me. I had a super social weekend. And then an old high school friend emails me, and I'm like, yep, totally not surprised. It's like my vibe is just broadcasting. Connect with me. I'm open. Invite me to something. I think also yesterday somebody else said he's coming to Vegas in January, wants to meet up. Guy's been reading my blog since he was a teenager, and now he's in his 30s, and he's coming to Vegas, wants to meet up. And I'm like, cool, let's do it. So it's kind of like people get. I think from other people's perspective, it's like they get that intuitive sense. Maybe I should invite Steve to something. And maybe like somehow they're tuning into my energy field and kind of pinging it and seeing what kind of response they get. And if they get a closed response, they may not send the invitation. But if they get a sense, oh, I think maybe I should invite Steve. Like maybe he would be open to this. Then they might go ahead and do it.
It ties nicely into the subjective reality model of like maybe reality is doing the same thing to us as well. Where If we're open to something, it will send us opportunities. But if we're skeptical, closed off, then it seems like reality comes to a standstill.
Absolutely. Like at the start of this quarter, at the start of every quarter, I like to set goals and intentions for the quarter, and I like to make them subjectively aligned. So I ask first, like, what's the flavor of the quarter I want to have? What kind of quarter do I want to have? So around October 1st, I'm setting my intentions. I think I did a little sooner than that. But I thought, okay, fourth quarter this year, I want to have, what do I want? I want to have a very spiritual quarter is what my intention was. And I thought, I want to open up spiritually. I want to have it be like a spiritually social quarter. Like I want to connect with people who are into anything related to what I would call spirituality. And that includes subjective reality. Just like people who want to explore more than just the objective nature of life. Not so much work and career or financial related stuff, but just more expansive stuff. Like let's explore in the space of spirit and see what's there. And the funny thing is then I get an interview to a spirituality podcast interview. Then you invite me to an interview seemingly out of the blue. And then, I get an invitation to a plant medicine journey. It's like, and then another person says, hey, we do plant medicine journeys up here. If you want to join us sometime, let me know. It's like, okay. It's like the floodgates open. It's like now I start getting these spirituality related invitations, and it doesn't seem to matter if I blog about it and tell people or just hold it privately in myself. As long as I tell reality in some way, it's like that starts to open up. I like to blog about it too, but I don't find it's actually necessary. I just do it as a way. I do it more for energetic reasons. Like if I could blog about it, it helps me know I'm not encountering any internal resistance. Like I'm not ashamed to say it. I don't feel afraid of it. But if I can't blog about it, to me, I take that as a bad sign. Like now I'm not feeling congruent with it. So then it gives me some objections I need to work through. With this one, it was a pretty easy one to share.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. Like you put it out in your quarterly intention, it just starts flooding back into you.
It usually takes a while. It may take a few weeks sometimes to get going. Sometimes stuff will, open up right away. The timing I find is very variable. But I just chill and I just wait, patiently, and stuff starts happening. And it's always just so magical to see that, how your intentions, when you bounce them into reality, it bounces back something eventually.
Do you think the key is in that intermediate point where there's nothing coming yet, is to hold that intention or not feel doubt about it, or you don't notice a difference either way?
I tend not to think about it in that way. What I tend to think about is leaning into the vibe of what it will be like to be there. Because when I started the quarter, I wasn't feeling in a particularly spiritual space at the time. It was more probably in a mental space. And I think I was getting a little bit bored and I wanted to open up more adventurous things in life. And I thought the spiritual space would be a fun area to go to, kind of open up that way of relating to life. So then it's a bit of a vibrational shifting journey where it's like I'm kind of preparing myself to get ready for stuff to show up. But when I set the intention, I'm probably not feeling 100% ready for it yet, if that makes sense. It's like I gotta start gradually vibing with it. So when I got that first spirituality podcast interview, which I did some weeks ago, at first I was like, I don't know if I feel like doing that, but then I was like, no, this aligns with my intention. And so it's kind of like reality brings me that as a warm-up experience. And, there's and when you invited me, there was a part of me that is like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. But then it's like, no, it's aligned with your intention. Go for it. You got to keep leaning into space. So it's kind of like reality gives you those little intermediate invitations as a trail of breadcrumbs to help you warm up into it. Same thing when I got the plant medicine journey invitation. I'm like, by that point, because that was after I got the other invitations. And by that point, I was like, all right, I'm like 80% yes. When I first got it, I was like, I think I want to do it. But then I probed it, learned a little bit more about it. And then I'm like, okay, I can be all in with this. Let's do it. And then of course I had a lovely experience. And so it's like, you have to sometimes lean your way there. And so reality may drop you little breadcrumbs that are not necessarily the full manifestation you wanted, but it's helping you get your vibe aligned with it step by step.
Isn't it funny that we set these intentions and then we feel a resistance when things show up?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It takes a little, when your vibe's not aligned, it takes some courage to do some things, or it takes some, you have to kind of lean into the positive expectation space. You have to remind yourself what's good about this. Like, a good, podcast is fun. It's flowing. It's energizing. It's not draining, but your mind might go to the other side. Oh, this takes time and I got to put something on my calendar. And, for me, there's no nervousness in those kinds of things, but it's more like, oh, is it going to be boring? Is it going to be, is it going to be too much of the same, and you start having the doubts, that it's like you get some kind of invitation and your mind can start going to like, what's going to go wrong with it? What, is it going to be, usually it's somewhere on the spectrum of too boring on one side or too stressful on the other side. And so we don't want boredom and we don't want stress. So how do we find a way of making it fun and interesting?
Yeah. How do we find the flow and the energy? Mm.
Yep.
You mentioned plant medicine, so I'd love to dive into that. Sure. I know that you just came back from a weekend of doing some plant medicine, but I'd love to jump back to your first experience with ayahuasca in 2019. Tell me a little bit about that. And also going into that first experience, did you have any preconceptions about how it would go? And were those conceptions confirmed or challenged in any way?
Yeah, I did have some preconceptions because it was going to be doing 4 nights of ayahuasca. And I had friends that had done it before and they told me, it was an incredible experience. But one friend in particular had a very dark experience. He said it was awful and just like, demons visiting him kind of thing and just terrible, not feeling good the whole time. And just, he just wanted to get out of it and he would never want to do it again. So I was like, oh, okay. So that's what can go bad. Lots and lots of vomiting and just like, okay, so, thinking you're going to die. I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound good at all. But then other people telling me it's just amazing. And so I realized there's quite a variable range there to what can happen. So when I went there, I did something really foolish, which I would never want to do again. I was hanging out with my friends. We were having, I think, breakfast or lunch before our first night ceremony. And we were talking about our intentions for what kind of experience we want. And I'm like, I'm not scared. I want to go into this bravely. And I just want to have a really intense experience. I want like the full floodgates to open. And if demons come, whatever, I can handle demons. It's like, I just want all that stuff to come through. Just whatever it is, just bring it. And that was awful. I had a very, I found that the plant medicine is very sensitive to intentions. So please take my advice. If you do it, do not set that kind of intention. it can come to pass. So for me, it was like, I didn't purge the first time, which, almost everybody did. I purged the other 3 nights, but the first night I didn't have to purge. But I was feeling like racing heart rate. I felt paralyzed at one point, like I was lying on my back and I couldn't move. And my breathing was just racing. I felt like I couldn't get enough oxygen and I was just hyperventilating. I was like breathing like that. And even helpers were coming around to try to help me, and they're trying to get me to calm down my breathing. But like my body just wanted to do the opposite. It wanted to take in more and more air. I'm like, I'm not getting enough air. I need more air. And I was starting to panic a bit because I couldn't move my body either. I couldn't like move my arms or legs. I couldn't get up. So I felt paralyzed. Like I was almost feeling like I'm worried my lungs are going to get paralyzed and it's going to stop breathing. And meanwhile, I'm seeing all this crazy, vivid imagery, especially when I close my eyes. And it was like just so freaky. When I closed my eyes, I would see like these plant-like structures. And it's like they were so bright and colorful and so present, like right in my face. But I could feel them energetically. It was almost like how you would react when an alien shows up and it's standing 2 inches from your face. It's like right there in your face. And you're like, I can't avoid looking at this thing. It's right here. It's like in my face. It's not like you see it from 10 feet away and you're freaked out. It's like, imagine it just being inches from your face. It was like that kind of feeling of presence. Like there is something right here with me, even in my body. It's inside me. And I was just freaking out. And I was actually thinking I might die right now. And I was kind of like, damn, is this going to be like the last night of my life? And I was starting to try to make peace with that. Like, okay, well, if I die, I die. And I was trying not to be afraid of it, but I was like, damn, I couldn't control what was going on. It was really freaking me out, and I couldn't move much. And so, I couldn't really communicate what was happening inside to other people very well. There's music playing, and there was other people all around. I couldn't get up. Eventually, I was able to calm down a bit, and then helpers moved me to another spot where I was right near the door, and I got some fresh air. There's 40 people doing it all together. It was a lot of energy in the space, but then it was like a deeply emotional journey, like so much coming up, and then I learned, and this is a really important lesson I think for anybody else trying this. I learned that I could set different kinds of intentions, and so the next night I did it. I set the intention to, please, please, please give me a gentle experience. I don't want that again. It was very intense, very powerful, but I was just like, I don't want that. I'm okay with like a powerful mental and emotional journey, but I was like, just go easy on my body. Like make it physical. Like don't make me feel like I can't breathe or that I'm going to die. And the next 3 nights were all beautiful, like all very wonderful, delightful experiences, feeling like, okay, the visuals are intense, but it was milder. It felt like I was learning to communicate almost like with an alien species, like an alien energy. I mean, I know it's plant energy, but it's like it's like the plants were just coming in so fast and so intense. And it was like so much information coming in all at once. It's like they were trying to give me millennia's worth of wisdom all in one evening. And it was way too much. It was like, I didn't have the bandwidth to take it all in. And so it was just overwhelming me physically. But then, when I could tell it, slow down, be gentle. Let's talk. Then I could do more of a communication with it in a very gentle way. And it was kind of like feeling like it was still very present there, but it was not so nearly intense. And so even with the second journey last weekend, I remembered from the beginning, just tell it to be gentle. And so I would in my mind say gentle, or even out loud, I would say the words like gentle, gentle, gentle. And that helped, that helped.
I really relate to a lot of what you're saying, because I remember before my first one, I had a couple of intentions, and what surprised me was all of my intentions were answered. And this is not common with mushrooms, for example, where the mushrooms will kind of take you where they want to take you. They will answer some questions that you have, but they might also, have their own agenda or their own curriculum that they want to teach you. And so going into ayahuasca, I thought, I'm going to set these intentions, but I have no expectations of whether they're going to be answered or not, because it might just be ayahuasca's own journey. And what surprised me was I got both. The ayahuasca took me on its own journey, and it answered so many of my specific questions that I had for it. So that was really beautiful to see. The other thing that I related to what you just said was, so I also had a similar intention of, I think my intention was, I want to have an experience. Like, maybe I didn't say, like, give me the most intense experience, but I definitely...
Like, bring it.
Yeah, I wasn't that, that arrogant.
Do your
about
worst.
It. But I was like, I definitely want to have an experience. And the first 2 hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours, were so tough. I thought, oh my God, I have made a huge mistake. Like, this is going to be the worst night of my life. And then I kind of like calmed down a bit, because the thing from my previous experiences with mushrooms, I knew that a trip has an arc and that no state stays the same forever. And that the come up is usually the roughest. It's like a rough ascent, like a turbulent plane. Once you find your wings, you can kind of glide. So,
ooh, I love that analogy. Yeah, like the taking off and the turbulence. And you could feel the nervousness of people on the plane, like a takeoff and landing and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes the plane ascends really smoothly, but sometimes it's just like a shit show. And so,
yep.
And so
it's really like that.
So I'm in the middle of this, like, what I thought was like the worst experience of my life, and I was like, okay, hold on. First of all, I'm attaching a lot of meaning to this, so I kind of dropped some of the frames, and then I decided to tune into the grief and the sadness that I was feeling, because a lot of grief was coming up. And it felt so raw and so deep. And I almost too much, like too intense. And I was like, get me out of this. Get me out of this. I want to move out of this. And the trip started to shift into a more positive direction. And part of me was like, wait, I want to go back into the grief. That was interesting. Like, I want to experience that rawness. Because like once I started moving out of it, I actually got to appreciate how powerful that was, to experience that rawness of grief. And then from then on, the trip became one of the most beautiful, powerful trips. And so it just goes to show that, the ascent might be rocky, but just hold on, stay calm, breathe in, make new intentions to, maybe for it to go more gentle with you. And then things absolutely, they always shift. It's never going to be one state for the whole trip, is my experience of it.
Yep. For me, it's been very much like turbulence in the beginning, especially physically. And then it settles down, and then it's kind of like smooth as sailing for a while. And then it's a very gradual tapering off at the end.
Yeah. So I did one ceremony, and then 2 weeks later, my friend calls me up and he's like, there's this new shaman. He's coming to town. He's from Peru. I was in Mexico City at the time. He's like, he's from Peru. He's like been trained for generations. We got to go. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to go back after 2 weeks. Like, just that one ceremony was so powerful, and it gave me enough homework to work on for like a year. So I was like, if I go back now, am I going to be punished? And he's like, well, let me ask the shaman. Or I think I talked to my friend about it, and he's like, no, it's okay. Like, you always have more things to learn. Tune into it. If it feels right for you, do it. If not, then not. And so I was more nervous going into my second one, because I didn't know if I would be like punished for returning too soon. And also knowing how intense the first one was, I'm like, I have no idea what to expect, right? And I also set some intentions for it to be visual, because the first one was super emotional, but not as visual. And I was like, I want visuals. And you know what? That second one was the most visual trip I have ever had in my life. And also, the cool thing was, I felt welcomed back. And that was really important. Once I realized that, okay, I'm welcome in this space, there's no punishment, this thing that I was imagining. I came with pure intention, and the ayahuasca was receiving me with open arms. And also the fascinating thing was, it was a completely different curriculum. It's like taking two different PhDs. Like the first one, all these incredible lessons and homework. The second one, totally different lessons, still lots to learn, but completely different areas of homework. And also not as much homework per se as it was like, let's do the work now. So it's like, it took me on this wild ride, and it was working on me in the trip rather than giving me lessons to work on later. And then I did a third one again, which was also quite unique. So what it taught me was like, each ceremony is so different. It's so unique, and you truly don't know what to expect anytime. And anyone going into it with a confidence of, I know what will happen, is kind of deluding themselves.
Yep. My experience was similar in the part you mentioned about it takes you on its own journey, but it also responds to your intentions. Like it's the combination of those. Yeah, it's like you're cooperatively co-creating the journey together with it.
Yeah,
it doesn't
totally
take total control, maybe unless you invite it to, but you're not totally in control either.
Mm-hmm. And I was so grateful in the first one. I took my notebook with me, and in the toughest part, I was able to like kind of scribble some things in the dark, which helped ground me and helped me like I'm like, okay, well, at least I've got my notebook. At least I can like focus on taking some notes from the experience. But it was wild. And yeah, I'm curious, out of the 4 journeys you did in 2019, which one was the most profound, or the one that took you the deepest into your soul?
Well, it's hard to say because they're all different aspects of it. So it's hard to separate all 4 nights since it was 3 years ago. But I remember the first night was definitely the most intense emotionally. And then the other 3 nights were all pretty similar in a way. Even though we were supposed to stay, they were suggesting that we could, all stay in the room together. I kept going outside and walking barefoot on the grass and going on a hammock and stuff. And sometimes I needed assistance to get there because I was so dizzy that I couldn't walk straight by myself. So one of the helpers, I'd have to lean on her to just get to the hammock. Otherwise, I would have had to crawl to it. So once I got to the hammock, though, I could lie down on the hammock, and it was just so beautiful being outside under the moon and the stars. And so that was kind of like the place where I just like dialoguing with reality. It was so much better to be outside under the fresh air. It was just like so much, it kind of eliminated any of that stifling feeling. I think one of the things I really didn't like is inside they had all these smells and stuff. I think they were like spraying some things in the air, all these scented things. I don't know exactly what it was they were using, but it was really strong smells inside. Maybe it was to cover up the smell of everybody, puking. Because we all had buckets in front of us, and there was a lot of that going on. So it could have been, to remedy that. But the smells were so intense sometimes, and sometimes there was a bit of smokiness in the air in there. I don't know what it was from, burning things or candles or whatever, but it was just so intense that I just felt so much better, like cleaner air outside. And just, touching the grass. Sometimes I would just sit on the hammock and keep my feet on the grass, like literally grounding, barefoot. And that felt so good. Nice. It was like room temperature outside. But the grass felt a little bit cool. No wind or anything. So it just felt like, really nice out there and much quieter too, because they were playing music inside. So that way I could kind of just be in my own space. And then it was more of like a dialogue. So I would ask questions and get answers and visual things. And so it was almost more like I went into a podcast interview mode with it, but it definitely felt a lot lighter and gentle the other nights. Now, every night we had a different blend of ayahuasca. So it was a different experience each time. And it was familiar, but it wasn't the same type of experience every night. It was a little bit skewed one way or another. But I'd say the first 3 nights were all pretty similar into what the experience was like. And the first night was just the most, intense of all.
You did ask for it.
Yeah. Not doing that again. Yeah, I told it to bring it and show me its full potency, and it did. And I was like, okay, I don't want that.
Yeah, I remember the first night. So they gave us one dose and then a second dose for anyone who needed it, and then a third dose for anyone who needed it.
Yes,
And
same thing for us. And I could not fathom how people could go back for a second or third cup. Some people are like, I'm hardly doing anything. Like I had, one friend of mine there. I was doing it the first time with like maybe 12 or 15 people that I knew there from a group. We all went together, but then there were like 40 people total there. So I knew a bunch of the people there, and we would share about our journeys the next day. But like one friend is just like sitting there in his meditative state on his little mattress, and he's just like, looks totally chill and calm. And I'm like, blah, thrown up in a bucket, and other times I'm just like paralyzed and can't even move. And there's other people getting up in the middle of the room and they're dancing and stuff. And I was able to do that the fourth night, barely, like late into the night. But I could never go back for a second cup, because even when it was mild, it was still pretty intense. And I'm like, I don't want to raise this up higher. This is a lot already. But other people were going there. There's always a line. Some people are getting back and going for a second or third cup, and I'm like, wow. And I thought, maybe it's because I'm vegan or something. Maybe that makes me more sensitive to it. No animal products in my system for now. It's almost been 26 years. So, it's like, maybe that's it. And I was eating a lot of raw foods at the time too. And so I thought maybe it's just, it can make things more potent for me. So I thought maybe that's like all the plants. It's like I got so many plants going through me anyway. The plant medicine is going to come right in and feel right at home there and do its dance. And that's kind of how it felt.
Yeah, I find I've learned from experience, like with tripping with friends on mushrooms, for example, everyone's body is so different. I have one friend, he takes 1 gram of mushrooms. He's gone for 5 hours. He's on the couch. It looks like he's sleeping. And then he comes out of it. He's like, I've been chatting with mother for 5 hours, which is like his way of describing source. And then another friend in the same trip, he would take, 5-6 grams, and it would be not that intense for him. And for me, like, so just, I guess, calibrating and finding your own rhythm is very important.
Yep.
I remember in the first one, like I took 1 dose and it wasn't enough. And so I went for the second one. And then it really hit me, probably because the both doses suddenly combined.
Sometimes there's the time delay before it really starts kicking in, and it can take a while.
Yeah, totally.
With ayahuasca, it could be like even an hour before you might start purging.
Totally.
And then it could even be a good bit longer after that before the effects really start kicking in more strongly.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you find that ayahuasca indirectly or directly confirmed some of your existing models of reality, where you felt like you were maybe looking at the simulator or the raw source code of reality?
Yeah, I felt it was different, but I felt like it did align with the subjective reality a lot more than the objective one, especially that feeling of energy connection with people. It also just aligned with feelings of inspiration I've had for writing, like where ideas will just come to me and flow through me as if they're sort of an energy out there and I'm picking it up with an antenna in my mind somehow. It was like that, just being very sensitive. So that sensitivity, it's like I don't normally have that heightened level of sensitivity, but when I would have that ayahuasca experience, then it really heightens the sensitivity. But it aligns with, it's like a more extreme example of what I'm already experiencing in other ways, like through using a subjective lens, like kind of seeing that there's an energy field out there and we're all connected to it. We're not all separate beings. There is some kind of energy web that somehow links us all together. And you become more sensitive and aware of that energy web when you have one of those, those psychedelic experiences.
How did you conceptualize in your mind the entity or entities that you were communicating with? Did you feel like it was Source, Mother Aya, aliens? Like how, what was the vibe like for you going into?
Well, if I think of the simulator model, I just think of it as yet another interface. It's like this is another thing that can be simulated. It's another layer of experience. So I call everything an interface. It's like, it's a game within a game, so, okay, I can experience that layer of reality. It's just, I saw it as almost like, okay, now you're invited to gain a new interface, like a new skill.
Ooh.
It's much like joining a new social media platform. Like, okay, I've never been on this platform. Let me see what it's like. Okay, what do we do on this platform? Do we post text messages, videos, pictures? How do we interface with it? So it's like when this shows up and I go, okay, I got this plant medicine interface showing up now. How do I interface with it? How do I communicate with it? How do I cooperate with it? So when it showed up first, it's just like really intense. It's much like feeling overwhelmed with a new platform's interface. Like, oh gosh, there's all this stuff, floating at me. I've got this feed and I don't know what's what. And then you try to make sense of the different elements of it, the different components of it. So it was kind of like that with the ayahuasca experience. I'm trying to like make sense of the different aspects of it, like the visuals, the feeling, the body sensations, and then what kind of control, what do I feel like I want to control? What do I want to try to shift? What parts do I like? What do I want to enjoy here? How do I communicate with it? So the first time was like, the interface is just like my understanding of it. I don't have, so it's all scrambled. And then gradually as I make sense of it, then I can learn to, okay, now I can communicate with it. And then the more recent experience, it's like, okay, I already had some familiarity with the interface to having this kind of experience, although I was also doing substances that I'd never done before. Because we did like 4 different substances all layered, like taking one, each hour or so, and then they all start combining after a while. So that was kind of different, but it's still somewhat familiar. And then at least I worked out the interface for ayahuasca. So the other things blending with it were not so different and distinct that I couldn't leverage that relationship with them. The way I see it, it's like once you've learned several social media platforms, you can learn a new one more easily than the first one, right?
Oh, I like that.
So it's kind of like once you've done a few plant medicines, maybe, and even though my first experience was all ayahuasca, it was different blends of ayahuasca. So then it's like the new experience. There's ayahuasca there too, so you get that little bit of familiar interface, and then there's other things that were new, and I'm like, okay, but it gives me a bridge. It gives me a bridge to learning and to know that I can build an interface with these two and I can kind of see what they're like.
It's maybe a little bit like coding of like once you know one language, even though the other languages are different, it's easier for you to pick up because certain elements translate over to the new languages.
Sure. Yeah.
When I did mushrooms, I did some acid, I did DMT before I did ayahuasca. So going into ayahuasca, I was able to feel a little bit more prepared because having had experienced those 3 other interfaces beforehand. And one thing I noticed is that after ayahuasca, and also after trying DMT, I would have mushroom trips that if the mushroom trip was pretty intense, like I took a big dose, I would start to reach the edge of the DMT realm. Like I could actually feel myself crossing over and like starting almost like a DMT trip. Now, it wouldn't take me as far as actual DMT, but it felt like all roads lead to Rome, and some interfaces take you super deep, super fast. Some take you on this like, gentle journey, and it's like some are in between. But once you know one of them, you can kind of navigate the others a little better.
Yep. It's like a skill building. It's like a skill we learn to interface with it, but we're interfacing mentally, emotionally, maybe spiritually, energetically. And so if you're not familiar with it, it's going to be a shock, probably.
Oh yeah, I couldn't imagine doing ayahuasca as my first ever plant medicine. That would be insane.
It was. You're right. No argument there.
I want to ask you, what was your biggest lesson that you took away from your first set of ceremonies? And what were the lessons that you took away from your recent ceremony?
I think the most profound lesson I got from the first ceremony was this feeling of the consciousness of plants. Like it was something I maybe understood a bit intellectually. I had heard people doing, experiments with plants, like how plants can feel pain, they can anticipate things. Like somebody getting a pair of scissors to go cut or trim a plant. And yet if the plant was wired up to something, they like a voltmeter, they could see the voltmeter jump. It's like the plant perceives it's about to receive some kind of pain or cut, or so, I think it was an experiment with somebody bringing a flame to a plant, and it's like the plant reacted to the presence of the flame or even just the intention. And then the experimenter found like even without the actual flame, just setting the intention, having the thought to do it caused the reaction in the plant. And so I thought, okay, well, that's weird, but where do I file that away? Like, what do I do with that? But when I did the ayahuasca experience, even for many days afterwards, I was still feeling like, being in Costa Rica, you're surrounded by jungle plants. And so I felt this very intense, strong presence of the plants around me. And even when I came home and it's like dealing with house plants, I could feel like their energy or an energy field around them. So I began seeing plants as like more conscious and more aware, trees, grass, and so on. So I realized there's an energy around this space. And one nice thing about plants is like you could see them as a source of unconditional love because, for instance, a tree will never decline a hug from you. It's like if you want to connect with a tree with love, you just get that. It's like guaranteed connection with life because plants don't refuse connection. They're always there. But having that sensitivity to realize like there is this web of life that connects us all, and it's not just connected to humans. It's connected to all life, and maybe even non-living things too. So it gave me a sense there is this somehow it's some kind of consciousness or some kind of web of energy that connects everything in the simulation. That was something that I kind of knew it in some ways, but more intellectually, and this way it was more felt, like I could feel the perception of it. So getting that ability to perceive it through what seemed like my physical senses. Like when I looked at a plant, it was like I could see it differently with my eyes. Or when I would touch it, it could feel different when I touched it. So having those sensations come through the channels of my physical senses, not just like through my mind, like I'm channeling ideas, but actually feeling like I'm getting more fullness to that interface, that was really powerful. And even though the effect, tapered off over time, I could still access that to this day. I could still feel the presence. And in my more recent ayahuasca experience, I remembered that. And it wasn't as, it was a layer of other things too we were taking, but including psilocybin. But there was a house plant in the room. And so I was lying on the couch and I reached over and I touched the plant. And it wasn't as intense as, because we were taking lower amounts of things, but multiple things layered. And I was touching the plant and I'm just kind of connecting with its energy. And I was like feeling what the plant wanted. And I was feeling like the plant wanted to be seen as beautiful, like it was being not seen as beautiful as it could be. And I was like telling the plant, yes, you're very beautiful. and so it wanted to be appreciated for its beauty. And I was like, okay, great. It's like, not having a conversation out loud with it or anything, just like, there are other people hanging out in the same space, but I'm just kind of like putting my arm up into it and just touching the leaves of it and just feeling like, okay, there's this other being here and it's part of the presence. And there were two animals in the space too, a dog and a cat. And that was really amazing to see how they reacted and how they responded. Normally, I only learned there was going to be a cat there like a few hours before I went there. Normally I would avoid cats because I'm allergic to them. And I was like, oh, no, not a cat. And so I'm thinking, all right, this is going to be like, it's going to be 24 hours I'm spending there. And it's going to be like, okay, I'm going to have the itchy, watery eyes and the runny nose and all that. And sure enough, with the first hour before we started taking anything, that's what happened. I had that, the cat allergy started kicking in, and I'm like, I wasn't touching the cat, petting the cat, or anything like that, but just being in the space where there was a cat has that effect. So I'm like, So I, as the substances began kicking in, what really surprised and shocked me is the cat allergy disappeared completely. All the allergy symptoms cleared up and they went away, and I'm like, talking to the, plant medicine going, what, you can do that? And it's like, and its response is basically like, you don't need the allergy right now. Well, that's awesome. But I didn't know you could do that.
That's amazing.
Did you know that was possible?
Not at all. Wow.
Yeah. And so for the whole rest of the experience, all through the night, no cat allergy. And the cat would come around me, it'd jump on my lap. When I went to bed on the couch, it jumped up on top of me and it was like, it licked my face and it kind of camped out on my legs for a little bit. And I had no problem with it. It was like, and the animals definitely seemed to be responding to what we were experiencing. Like they were part of the energy space too. It's like it's like they seemed so loving and so just cute and adorable, just being around us, being in our space, and we were welcoming them and everyone was holding them and petting them and stuff. And it's like they just wanted to be there with the love energy field that we were creating. It was really, really fabulous to see, how like they're sensitive too. So it's like, people, plants, animals, we're all part of the same web of energy and we all are connected. We all can respond to each other.
Do you think the animals realized in some way that the humans had altered their perceptions, that their energy was altered?
I don't know. But certainly our perceptions of the animals changed. And maybe that, created some kind of effect too. Like the way we were looking at them changed. And so maybe they looked at us differently as well. But their behavior did seem to shift as we were getting deeper into the experience.
It's so fascinating that your cat allergy completely disappeared during the
Yeah,
trip.
I felt no symptoms from whatsoever. That puffy eyes went away. The itchiness went away. But then the next morning, as it began to taper off, finally it was tapering off a lot. Then the symptoms started coming back. And even when I went home, I was still feeling some symptoms. And my wife shares a bit of this reality, this allergy, and she started, getting a little cat allergy stuff from probably what was left on my clothes when I came home. So it's interesting. So it's like started coming back at the end.
Wow. And so what do you think the plants did? It's like they came into your system and they turned down the dial that said allergy.
They switched it off. It was like the allergy is just an energy. And
Wow.
they can shift the energy. So we could just turn that off right now. We don't need that.
Oh my God. It's like we need to focus on school right now. Turn that off.
So now I'm like, okay, well, I hope that happens every time if I have to do this at some place with a cat.
That's amazing. I wonder if you could take that somehow and apply it to the rest of your life, where you just eliminate the allergy entirely from your simulator.
Yep. Well, it's also an experience of the simulator showing me that more is possible. And it's funny because that is, part of my intention for the week was to show me what's possible beyond old limits. And that was an old limit, a cat allergy. And so now reality says, it's possible to not have the cat allergy, at least when you're under the influence of these substances. So I'm like, okay, well, I mean, maybe that's the only way it could happen, at least for now, but I know it's possible because I experienced it firsthand for myself. And it was very obvious, the difference. It's like it switched off entirely, nothing, no issues at all. I could even pet the cat. It was on my lap. It was on my legs and stuff. It was licking my face. I would normally be miserable in that kind of situation, like with the physical symptoms. So, and it's like, I didn't even set the intention to get past that cat allergy. I didn't know that was something I could ask for, but I did set the intention to move beyond limits. And I let reality choose which limits it wanted to show me another possibility beyond. So it's like I set the intention to show me more of the possibility space that I haven't accessed yet. So it showed me you don't have to have a cat allergy all the time.
It just goes to show also that, sometimes people think when you take these medicines, you see visions, you hallucinate, but actually it changes you. It changes your state. And it's like, you're not the same person during the trip at all that you are in your day-to-day life. More awareness, removes allergies, like completely tweaks certain parts of your avatar.
Yeah, I don't know if I wonder about the hallucination word, whether that's accurate. I think it's probably more accurate to call it sensitivity. Like what I'm seeing is real.
Yes.
I'm seeing something that was maybe there all the time, all along.
Yes. Yeah.
But now I'm seeing another layer to reality that I didn't have a direct sense perception for. It's like it opens up my senses, kind of like, opening up your sinuses, and now you can breathe better.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think hallucination is a word more from the objective standpoint for people who are maybe skeptical of it. For me, it feels like, especially with DMT, I had this experience from the very first time I tried DMT. Felt like I was looking at the raw source code of reality. And I was like, ooh. And also there was a feeling of finally, because all my life I'd been searching for this subjective first-person proof that there was more to reality than meets the eye. And DMT was maybe the first moment where I was like, ooh, what I'm seeing here is not a hallucination. I'm seeing a different layer of reality, and it's unmistakable. I know it's real because I'm experiencing it. It's changing the qualia of my whole experience. And it's so much more than just some like fancy visuals that maybe cartoons represented that way or movies, Was it the same for you when you experienced ayahuasca for the first time and you're like, wow, whatever I'm experiencing here, there's a truth to it that is undeniable?
I think for me, it was more like a validation of things that I already suspected. That's really weird when you look at it through the subjective lens, because it's like you have to start creating doubt about the objective reality in order to crack open a gateway to subjective experiences. And then plant medicine shows up and it's like, here you go. Here's validation that you're actually in a subjective universe. But then I wonder, would that have showed up as an experience for me personally if I hadn't gone down the subjective rabbit hole first? Like, so many people, if they do the objective model, they may find a reason to resist or not even try plant medicine. There's all kinds of reasons not to do it. What drew you to it? Were you already thinking like maybe there's a subjective aspect to reality? Maybe it's not quite what I think. Why did you want to do it? Were you looking for validation of what you were already suspecting? Or did you just want to, were you just, I mean, I guess the idea is you must have been open-minded in some way. You have to open your mind to do that. Like, even if you're coming from a pretty objective model, you got to open your mind to having new experience. Otherwise, you're not going to want to do that.
That's a really good point. For me, it was a burning desire to know the truth, to know more about the true nature of reality.
Bingo.
And so,
yeah,
I feel like I would have discovered DMT and mushrooms and ayahuasca someday, somehow. Like, there would be, on some level, it would pop up in my reality and I would go through that door. And I also feel like these substances are kind of like cheat codes in the video game. So they're planted all across, like mushrooms you can find, I think, on 6 of the 7 continents, psychedelic mushrooms. And so they're always there. They will pop up in everyone's reality at some point, for sure. Like, someone will mention it in some way. And then it's kind of up to the person of like, do I want to see the source code of reality or do I just want to play the video game?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the burning desire, I think that's what drove me to find out. Also, like, my very first experience was with acid, and it was very positive. It was such a opening of frequencies experience that I then, after that experience, I realized, okay, there's more gold here to be mined. Like, all of these things that people talk about, I gotta go discover them. I gotta go try them out.
So can you see how reality may have responded to your intention? You want to know that you set the intention to know the truth. And so reality, now reality can bring you more of the possibility space. But would this have happened? Would this have showed up in your life if you hadn't set that intention? Did you modify the simulation to bring you this experience? There's that perspective on it. That's the subjective perspective.
I modified the simulation to bring me the experience, and then the experience further modified the simulation for me.
Yep.
Forever.
But it shows up through objective story. It's part of the objective story that plant medicine exists. It's a weird thing in reality. Like, why is this here? So we say, oh, just some plants grow that have this effect on human beings, and we harvest them, we ingest them so we can have these experiences. It's a very weird thing for humans to do. I mean, it starts to bend the objective story in a very strange direction. Like, why do we do this?
Totally. And then no one questions it. It's like,
that exists. Okay. Yeah. But, notice how we have to get more flexible in what we allow into the objective story. And so then the question is, how much more flexible can you get? How much more can you allow in? How much more is possible? That's something I began exploring with, before I did the first plant medicine journey 3 years ago, many years before that. Then I started exploring this with other aspects of reality. I mentioned the money stuff, manifesting that. I started doing more things with relationships. Like, can you meet somebody and have a great connection with them instantly? Do you have to treat people like strangers? How much, how far could you go with things, having a connection with somebody? Can you just invite somebody on Twitter to sleep with you and have it work, And so I started leaning into that and just going with the flow of those kinds of weird experiences relationship wise and seeing what was possible. Like, let's lean into the possibility space. Let's ask for more. And it all starts with opening your mind to it, like telling yourself, okay, more is possible. And then you got to get past any shame and fear and guilt and resistance to having it actually happen, having it be real. And then same thing happens there. The doors open and you realize, wow, all kinds of other relationship experiences are possible with other people too. Things that you thought, this could never happen to me. Then it starts happening for you.
It kind of makes one feel like a dork for not exploring those possibilities earlier.
Yeah, when you realize, damn, why didn't I do that earlier? It was that easy. Yeah. Ridiculous stuff. Like, feel free to cut this part out if you don't want to share this, but like Rochelle and I, we decided to have, we kind of were open to the idea of having a threesome. So we posted on Facebook that we're open to the idea of having a threesome. And somebody writes back and says, a woman writes back and says, I'm coming to Vegas in a while, a few days or whatever. I'll have a threesome with you guys. And we did. And it's like, that's all we had to do. That's all it took. I mean, objectively, it was very simple. A few messages and that's it. It's like, really? But of course, how much shame and fear and guilt do we have to block ourselves from that? And then once we had that experience, it's like, oh, it's easy to actually have it again. And you can, you get past all the shame of it. This is something that's really fascinating too, is when you get past the shame, you get such a different response from reality. I know this through blogging. When I write something and I'm leaning into exploring something new, but I'm still feeling resistance to it. Like, I'm not sure, I don't know if this is a good idea that I should be exploring this, or people are going to judge me for writing about this. Sure enough, I get judgment. People respond with critical emails. I may get some praise too, or other questions about it. But if I anticipate criticism, I get criticism. But when I get to the point where I own this exploration and I don't feel any shame about it, I think I could totally do this and I'm just going to be shameless about it. Then I can do things that other people will say, you're going to get shamed for that. And it doesn't happen. And I demonstrated that live when I was doing a talk. I think it was maybe around 2013. I was giving a talk at a dating summit in New York City and at a friend's conference there. And I was speaking for 2 days in a row, along with a bunch of other speakers, like an hour one day, an hour the next day. And this is back when I was more active on social media. I deleted most of my social media accounts since then. I just didn't want to, interface with that anymore. But back then, I think I had like about over 30,000 followers on Twitter. And so I said, I said, right live in front of you guys right now, I'm going to tweet, I heart threesomes and send that out to my Twitter followers. And people are like, no, don't do that. Or like, oh, I can't believe you're going to do that. And I said, what do you expect? And they're like, people are going to criticize you. You're going to get shamed. And I said, really? Let's see what happens. I said, because I don't actually feel any shame in that. I actually do like it. And it's like, it's true for me. And so why should I don't feel any shame. So why should reality bounce shame back to me? So let's see what happens. So I tweet that. And I said, you could go check my Twitter account and see how people are responding. It's all public, right? So go look. And so then I tweet it right then and there. And then the next day I said, okay, it's been 24 hours. Let's check in. Let's look at the responses. And like one of the responses is like, me too. And other people are like, good for you. And there, how many negative responses were there? 0. There was not a single critical reply. And how would you expect that with that many followers? Surely somebody's going to criticize it or shame you for it. No. And that's one of the things I found most incredible about like extra validation of how subjective reality works. It reflects your own shame back to you. And if you have none, it doesn't need to reflect back shame.
Wow.
And it won't bother. That's one of the things I found most incredible about blogging. And I saw that pattern come up again and again and again. And then I learned, like, if I'm going to lean into something, why don't I just try to own it early? Like, why do I need to start writing about it when I'm still feeling shame? So I try to work through the objections first in myself. And then when I get past the objections, I'm like, is this really something I need to object to? Is what I'm doing wrong here? And if I feel like it really is wrong for me, then why do it at all? And if I can find a pathway to feeling like this is right for me, then why have any shame about it? So I really try to work through, like, what parts do I object about and why? And do I need those objections anymore? Are they true? So you mentioned like trying to understand what's true about reality. It's kind of like the same thing with your own shame, with your own objections. Like, what is really true? Where did I learn this shame from? Where did I learn to feel guilty about this? Where did I learn to feel this fear? Is that accurate? Does it really make sense? And so then you can play around with that. Like on the fear side, it had to do with exploring public speaking. That's a place I wanted to get to where I really didn't have fear anymore. And then the ultimate of that was doing a 3-day workshop, I think that was one in 2015, going through it, doing 3 days on the Vegas Strip and doing it totally off the cuff, going with the flow of inspiration and audience suggestion and doing it with no fear and no anxiety. So imagine you have to get up and speak in front of an audience for 3 days without any content prepared. Just got to go with what's in your mind, what comes up, being spontaneous, including making up games and exercises for the audiences to do interactively. Can't bore everybody. By that point, I'd already done like about a dozen 3-day workshops that were all pre-planned. But I noticed as I was doing them, the first one I planned out everything 100%. But I noticed with other workshops, it actually was better when I just went with the flow spontaneously in front of the audience and I broke from the script. And so, by the second or third workshop, I was doing like 75% scripted and 25% spontaneous. And then it was like 50-50. And then later on, it was like, okay, now I'm sticking with my plan like 25% of the time and I'm going off plan 75% of the time. And that 75% is better than the stuff I'd planned. And then I thought, could I get to the point where I just don't need to have that crutch of the script anymore, the plan, the outline, having notes up there with me? Can I just do it totally note free and not even prepare, just like prepare vibrationally, prepare energetically, prepare emotionally, meditate, lean into the vibes of just, imagining being up there, visualize having fun, connecting with the audience, playing with people, having a fun experience. It's not a performance. It's a conversation, switching to that kind of framing. It's just as I'm talking to you now, it's like something I had to study for, prepare for. We're just talking. Public speaking can be the same kind of vibe, same kind of thing. And so that was like setting that stretch goal was like the kind of the ultimate thing of probing for a better relationship with reality. Because like, why should you have fear in an experience that is clearly not dangerous? And so I learned getting up in front of an audience can be a joyous experience. You can even lean on them and ask them for help. You could ask them for suggestions. You could ask them for ideas. There's so much fun to be had up there. You can joke around with them, play with them, take the conversation, the experience in so many different directions. Being open. It's kind of like with the ayahuasca. If you try to control public speaking, you create fear and anxiety. If you try to control the experience, reality gives you a different response, and your own body gives you a different response. But if you try to play with it, then it's like, oh, I'll play back at you. Let's have fun together. Let's make it a beautiful experience. Let's co-create the experience together.
That's really interesting. So it seems like control is being punished by the simulator or discouraged, and spontaneity and flow is encouraged. And too much control, it's like maybe reality doesn't like it when we try to instill our own sense of control over reality.
Yeah, I do find it's like a dance where no one leads. But you do have to move and you do have to dance. And so you don't want to go to either extreme where you let reality control everything, because now you're abdicating responsibility. You're not playing your role. You're not creating any story. You're just sitting around doing nothing and you're waiting for the simulation to do everything for you. It's kind of like trying to play a video game where you don't even touch the controller. It just sits there and it's like that behavior gets punished, so to speak. If you go to the other side and you try to control everything and you don't engage with what the story's bringing you, with what reality's bringing you, you don't follow the trail of synchronicities that are coming up, you also get you get problems. You maybe get punished for that and that you don't get an interesting experience. But if you co-create it, now you're like tuning into the web that connects us all, and especially co-creating with other people, letting everybody play their role, kind of seeing the fun in that, like, let's all do this journey together, getting past your own individuality and just seeing it as like, it's a very collective, co-creative experience, and flowing with that, vibing with that, that works. That works really well. It works in so many areas of life. It works with relationships. It works with money. It works with, interesting career path to follow. It works with travel adventures.
You made me think of how learning how to have a good trip on psychedelics prepares you on how to have a good trip in life. Because there's similarities between letting go, having some intention, but being open to surprises, and learning how to glide with reality, learning how to flow with the currents, flow with the waves.
Yeah, I like that. Glide with reality.
Yeah.
I sometimes think of reality as a wave generator. It keeps generating waves of invitations to different kinds of experiences, and we're the surfers. And we get to decide which waves to catch. If we try to catch every wave and say, I'm just going to say yes to everything reality gives me, we're going to exhaust ourselves. We'll be tired out. But if we choose the waves selectively and we say, okay, not this wave, but that one I'll ride, then we're co-creating the experience together, and that's where things start to get really flowing and magical.
If life is a little bit like a video game, do you think we can unlock God mode in the video game?
I wonder about that sometimes. And I think maybe when we're ready for it, when we're ready to have God mode. But I think if we encounter it too early, it might break the experience and the enjoyment of the game. Like when you've actually played a video game, and if you learn God mode and you do a cheat code, and you haven't really played through the game in normal mode, that can ruin the experience for you. Because now when you go back to normal mode, it feels too stifling. You don't have as much possibility there. Your character's so vulnerable, and you may not actually like it as much. So on some level, I could see where if God mode remains hidden, it might be for a reason, or at least if it remains inaccessible. But after you've played out enough of the regular game in the normal mode, then other modes might become accessible to you. And that might be a good time to, ask for that kind of intention. So, I wonder about asking for so much more that it actually would break the story and corrupt it and sort of ruin the human life. And I feel like I'm developing more trust over time to trust the limitations. And we can see limitations as a negative thing, but they also give railing and they give guidance to our story. They help to sculpt our characters. They give us something to play with. So just as we have constraints in a video game, like how high our character can jump or, how strong they are, how vulnerable they are, how many hit points they have, and so on, it makes the experience more engaging, more immersive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like one of the limitations that's obvious in our simulation is death, right? So how do you think of death in a simulated or dream world? And do you think there's a point in the game where we graduate past that, past the need for death?
Yeah, I do think that's possible. And what's really fascinating is that when you have a subjective shift, it shows up through the objective story of the world. So, for instance, let's say you get to the point where, you say, I don't need death anymore. I feel like it's not necessary. I feel like I'm not creating separation between my human life and how I would live as a spiritual being. And why don't we just merge them and combine them right now? And I'll work on that with this human body. And I don't really feel like I need to die, cross over, transition. I don't really need to have that simulated right now. I feel like I want to keep learning and growing just with the body I have right now, at least for a bit longer. Then what will happen in the objective world? Well, you might see something like, okay, there's a medical breakthrough. We extend our lifespans, or we somehow transfer our consciousness to some kind of a machine, some way of doing that, or we keep our physical brains alive and we have cyborg-like bodies. You'll see the science will, evolve and will catch up. So you'll be like, okay, the objective world is now creating a story to make this possible that aligns with it. So just as you see the presence of plant medicine show up when you think, I want to know the truth, and here you go. Here's some truth. Here's a pathway to it. Here's an interface for it. So if you reach the point where you're really like, I don't need death, then you start seeing the story shift in that direction, and the cure for death shows up suddenly, or gradually. It flows into the storyline, and of course, it all seems perfectly logical. Oh, that was going to happen anyway. Okay, sure.
Interesting. Do you think there's a benefit to crossing over or transitioning to the other realms?
Yeah, I think there could be. I'm sort of open-minded about it. I feel like dying could be interesting. Not dying could also be interesting. I'm sort of agnostic, about that. So, crossing over to say some kind of non-corporeal phase of existence, then I think, okay, then you have other adventures as some kind of spiritual being, without your body, and you may detach yourself from your human identity. So who knows? There's other people that say we have multiple parallel lives. Like in the multiverse, we're actually living as different versions of ourselves and going out and experiencing different timelines, like different quantum realities, and in a way where all of ourselves are experiencing that simultaneously. And then maybe we recombine and remerge and compare notes, after we die. Who knows? I just see it as so much is possible, and I don't really know what's going to happen, but I don't really need to know what's going to happen. A way I often think about human life is, what skills should I work on that could still be useful after I'm dead? Because if everything stays here, then it's not okay, I better get better at accounting. It's okay, that's going to stay here. That's not going to be too useful in the afterlife. But dealing with fear, dealing with anxiety, creating a positive relationship with reality, all that stuff, in terms of the energetic-based interface, anything that can carry over to the spiritual side, awareness, making decisions, consciousness, managing our thoughts, choosing our thoughts. If we go to the other side and we don't have bodies, but we still have some form of thought, of managing our energy patterns, and we still have some kind of reality around us. Maybe it's not a physical reality. Maybe it's a reality of energy fields that we're in. We still have a relationship with it. So I think about, the skill of relating to reality in different ways, perceiving like the connectedness between everything, being able to manage and move away from things like fear and anxiety. I mean, imagine you go to the afterlife and you have all these fears and worries and anxieties in life, and then you die and you're still there. You're like, oh no, I'm dead. I'm scared. It's like now you're scared of being dead. You're either scared of being alive, or you're scared of all the things that you get to experience being alive, or the experience, you're scared of dying. Then you go to the afterlife, and now I'm scared of being dead. I'm scared of other astral entities out there. I'm scared of, like what happens. And then what? It's like maybe you get the opportunity to reincarnate. No, I'm scared of that too. It's like, I don't know how to choose which body do I take? How do I make that decision? Like not being able to make decisions, being indecisive. Imagine carrying all the crap and the baggage from how you interface with life that's not really working for you. And now you got to go deal with that too when you're dead. That's one of the reasons I rule out things like suicide, because I'm like, it's not going to solve anything. I'm just going to have all the same problems on the other side. So it doesn't make anything better. I might as well figure it out here while I got the body at least. That at least makes it interesting, gives me some interesting options. Otherwise, you can only do that once maybe. How do you commit suicide when you're already dead?
Fair enough, yeah.
That it's like, oh, damn, that didn't work.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. It's like if you cross over too soon, you don't get out of anything. You're still you, with your consciousness is still the same, I think, on the other side. So whatever training you've managed to do here, whatever you've trained your consciousness to be here, that's the only thing that you get to carry over to the other side.
Yep. Like in this human life, I'm a life coach, and I actually think that would be a cool thing to be on the other side, except I want to be a death coach. So like, I want to learn to get good at being dead, and then I can teach people how to be dead. I was like, like some newly arrived people. You just died, didn't you? Oh yeah, I just crossed over. Like, now what do I do? Well, let me teach you. Let me show you some things. Let me introduce you to the world of the dead. Here's what you can do. And I think that would be a cool role to play. Like coach the dead.
Totally. When you explore possibility right now of like stretching your reality to have more of what's possible, what kind of directions are you pursuing right now in terms of like, I'd love to have this in my reality be more possible?
What I'm exploring right now is group manifestation, like group intentionality. Doing this less as an individual, because I've done so much of that for past couple decades or so. And now I want to see like, what happens if I do this with other people? Like I can see this as other characters in my simulation, but what if I gather a bunch of them together and we all say, let's explore as a group. Let's explore together. Let's try to manifest together. What happens if you get dozens of people holding the same kind of intention? Does it magnify the effect? And so I asked people this, I'm doing Zoom calls with people. We're doing a call every Friday for like 9 calls in a row. We just did our second one. So this Friday we'll be having our third one. And I asked people like, do you think that if we all pool our intentional thoughts and energy together, do you think it magnifies the effect? And most people are agreeing, I think that would have a bigger effect than if you just do it for yourself on your own. So I'm like, okay, I could see that as like people agree with me, or I could say that's reality saying yes to this. And it's inviting the exploration. So on each call, we're doing experiments too. Like when we just look at everybody on the screen on a Zoom call, I'm like, imagine that that this is your reality staring back at you. Imagine there's just one consciousness here, and all the people you're looking at your screen, this is your reality. And then, and see what that's like, see what that feels like. And imagine everybody on a call all doing that together, holding that thought. And then flip it around. Imagine now you are reality and you're looking at all the humans in your subjective zone, or you're the reality controller and you're looking at all the humans out there, and you can say, hi humans, and interface with them that way. And how does that feel? And, like when people change their perspectives on this, they get a different reaction. They get a different response from people. And then we take people into breakout rooms and have them do this in a group of like 3 or 4 or 5 people. And they do other kinds of experiments too. Like in one, people are talking to the others in their group as if the others in their group are all representatives of reality. Like they're all subjective dream characters. And then we instruct the people, go ahead and respond to them like they're representatives, like your dream characters, like you're representing reality. And we do different experiments there. So it's a chance to give people to play in this space of like like, what would happen if the people in your reality actually cooperated with your desire to explore the subjective perspective? And all you need is enough people who say yes to that. Say, yes, I want to explore with other like-minded people who want to play in this space together. Like, what if we all just try exploring? Like, we're all characters in each other's dreams and we're all connected some way. And so then each, on a call by call basis, we try to figure out what to do and we figure out what the group perspective is. And I'm getting surprised by this a bit too, because the people doing this are like even more playful and a bit over the top with their playfulness than I was expecting. So it's cool that people want to do this together, but they're taking me into a zone where they're still showing me that I have a bit of resistance to this. And I'm like, wow, I resist that. Wow. I really do. Like, as much as I've explored this, they're showing me, nope, you still have further to go. And I'll give an example. So I mentioned like the intentional tracer they set for the first week was butterflies. I'm like, great. I had no resistance to anything we did in the first week. But on the second week's call, near the end, when we do our intention experiments, we kind of line them up near the end of the next call, and that's going to be our intention experiment for the week. So I set it up as like, let's do this breaking past limitations. And people were like, great, that sounds good. Let's like show me, like open up new opportunities, reach me further into the opportunity space, show me what's possible, like crack my old limitations, open up more windows into what I can access. Everybody's like on board with that. But then when I ask for the intentional tracer and I start getting suggestions, and the way I do it is I try to see, I get a bunch of people start responding and then they start responding to each other's responses. And I try to see if there's a certain gravity, like a bunch of people are agreeing with one they want to do and it pulls it in that direction. So the first week, I think the first suggestion was actually coffee, but I kind of dismissed that. And I was like, no, coffee's not so good, because it's like it's too common because so many people have coffee everywhere. And so we went with butterfly because that was like another suggestion a bunch of people were voting for. And butterflies are a little less common. So if butterflies show up, it's not necessarily you have a cup of butterfly every day. Well, what's really weird is then the coffee thing started showing up too in some ways. Like Rochelle saw a picture of a latte with a butterfly art in the latte, so it's like butterfly in coffee. And then for the recent, psychedelic experience with a group, I go to this neighborhood where all the streets, this is a part of, town I'd never been to before, but I go to this neighborhood where all the streets are named after coffee. Like double shot, and French roast and stuff. And, it's like, those are the street names all in this neighborhood. And I'm like, that's weird. It's like, I'm going to the coffee neighborhood for this, because I didn't know that in advance. But this is the part that kind of got to me on the second call when they're coming up with the intentional tracer. The one that ends up winning is butts, like human rear ends. That's what they want for their intentional tracer. And I'm like, really? That's what we're going to do? Like for this group experiment, you want to have that be your intentional tracer? It's like shows up with some kind of butt reference. But I'm like, seriously, this is what you want to do? And I'm just like, even retelling it now, it feels a little embarrassing. Like, how is this, it's like, there's a part of me that thinks this should be more professional and that's not professional. Right. And that's a limiting belief. That's a limiting thought. And I thought, you know what, if this is what my reality is telling me, it wants to go there. Fine. We'll do that. We'll go there. And it's like, I'm still processing my way through, like, this is silly. This is over the top silly. Like, why do you guys want to manifest this? So now I'm getting emails from people during the week, of course, about their butt synchronicities, and they're there, they're happening, and I'm getting them too. And Rochelle's getting them as well. And I'm like, really? Like, this is, so it's like reality's showing me, whatever's embarrassing to you, I have no shame. I have no embarrassment about anything. Human body parts, whatever, you can use that for your intentional tracers. It's almost like Monty Python-like in its ridiculousness. So that's been a bit of a stretch experience for me. It was one thing for me getting past my own, like shame about certain things from my past, but now realizing that reality is even more shameless than I realized. Like it does not care about those things. It's not ashamed of human body parts being used as an intentional tracer, And it's like, and like, I realize, like, I don't think the other people in the group are really ashamed of this, or they really have the resistance to it than I did. And so I'm like, why do I have that? Probably because, just the being raised Catholic, it probably links to something in my past of what I was taught growing up. Who knows? So it's kind of like inviting me to loosen up even more. And I thought I was already pretty flexible and open-minded, but it's like, nope, you still have ways to go. I'm like, oh,
Oh,
fine.
that's so interesting. It feels like there's always next levels in reality, always
Yeah.
new levels to unlock. Even when you think you've gotten so much experience in something, then, for example, like I have this with psychedelic trips. It's like I feel like I've gotten experience, and then it's like the next trip comes along. I'm like, wow, there's another level. We can go deeper. And maybe reality is the same way in that it guides us to let go of shame. Like, have you thought of that? Of like, reality is shameless, and it's guiding the avatar you to release bits of resistance on your path until you're completely shameless as well.
Yeah, that creates a really interesting journey, like following the path of overcoming shame and overcoming really, it doesn't have to be shame, just resistance of any kind. Like as an example, I grew up without a lot of touch. If we were touched, it was kind of like you're being spanked or punished for something, or your arms being grabbed. It's like you did something wrong. Not a household where people said, I love you, or hugged or anything like that. So I was not comfortable with touch later in life. It didn't have a touch friendly life. I felt resistance to it. And I had it took a long time to work through that because I realized I wanted to be a touch friendly person. I would see friends in high school where girls would walk up to them and they would hug them. And I was like, how do people ever experience that? Like, I could never have the experience of somebody walking up to me, recognizing me, greeting me with a hug. It just did not happen. It was not part of my reality. And yet part of me wanted to have that experience. And I just thought, oh, this is going to be such a long journey. And reality responded to that intention by making it a long journey. So it was a long journey for me. It was very slow, very gradual. I had to keep leaning into it and dealing with, what came up for me. And eventually I got to the point where I felt like I was really well past that. And then just like touch and hugs and cuddles were just a part of my life. Like this, with this group experience, we were all like a big cuddle puddle, it was like very loving space. It was very different than the solo journeying in Costa Rica. This was like very social experience. I didn't want to go off and be somewhere by myself. I'm just like cuddling, one woman in each arm and just loving each other, just like, it's like there's nothing sexual, but it's just like lots of love and just, loving each other through touch and just feeling good. Touching each other's faces, got a lovely head scratching, which, I totally enjoy, and just blissing out with that. And, I realized like I feel totally 100% comfortable in that space. I didn't need the substances to get there either. Like I could do that without that very easily. It's just like, as long as the other person that's consenting, beautiful, could just instantly, meet and cuddle people. And I've done that with many, many people. Greeting people with hugs, just very normal, for me now. And so I look back and I see that it was a very long journey to get there, but you can definitely turn the page on that kind of thing. You can turn the page where things that you used to be afraid of, there's just no fear at all anymore. You can turn the page on, stuff that used to feel ashamed of. The shame is just completely gone. You can't even access it, anymore. It's just not there. So that is a really beautiful part of the journey, because then you get to just experience the joyful stuff. But I think we appreciate it more when we have had to go through that journey of shame or guilt or fear or something like that, when we had to go through the resistance. Because I got to tell you, it's like when I'm cuddling somebody or sharing, touch, affection, I just appreciate the heck out of it. Because like there's a part of me in the past who's remembering not having that. And it's like that part of me is still there. And that part is just gushing appreciation of like how amazingly abundant this feels and how beautiful it is to finally have that in life. And I think I would not nearly appreciate it as much if I didn't go through that scarcity relationship with it first.
So for anyone listening, would you say that if they're going through something that feels like a part of them that they can't change, they should have hope that actually over time they can chip away at it and have a 180-degree shift from who they were before to their new character?
Yep. And I'd say in addition to hope, a good place to start is actually start feeling less resistance to being right where you are. Like that's what keeps you fixed. The resistance to where you are makes you stay stuck there. And it's like those are your docking clamps holding you in place, the resistance. And when you basically say, you know what? It's okay to not have touch in my life right now. It's okay to be broke. It's absolutely okay to be the way I am, to have this experience right here, right now. You have to let it let go of the resistance to where you are. Otherwise, that resistance holds you stuck. Even if you have desires and intentions and hope for something better, you will stay stuck for a lot longer if you resist where you are. So and if you want to move even faster, start loving where you are, start appreciating where you are, start, like finding things to appreciate in scarcity, start finding things to appreciate in aloneness. The more you can appreciate where you are, that's what lets go of your docking clamps. And now you can start floating freely. And then your desires can carry you forward. But you got to unclamp yourself from that resistance. The resistance that'll stick you in place more than anything else. So I didn't start floating towards abundance until I let go of the fear and resistance to being broke. When I accepted being broke, then money started flowing through much more easily. And it's every year since then, it's been very abundant. But I had to let go of the resistance to being broke. And I think because I did experiments, trying on the desire side. I read the book Think and Grow Rich, and I, visualized the money coming through, and all I got was more debt. It did not work. It was like think and stay broke, or think and grow your debt is how it played out for me. I don't recommend that book because it didn't work. I know some people love it, but maybe those were people who didn't resist where they are. I've had to work on the resistance to where I was.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it would be more like think and love being broke, or just love being broke would be a better, I think, way to go. You could, if you love that, if you can, just see all the good things in life that you can experience for free, the sunlight,
the ocean,
books you can read, music, the ocean. When I started appreciating all that and said, I can have a great life being broke. And when you get to the point where you say, I can have a great life being alone. Oh, it's so beautiful to be alone. Then you get a relationship partner, then you float over there. Yeah.
Wow. That's so beautiful, Steve. In your recent experience, did you feel the ayahuasca or the mushrooms more, or it was sort of a mix of both? Because you said you took 4 different substances. Can you describe what they were?
Yeah. Well, the first one was like, I didn't even know what these things were before we were taking, but I remembered the names of them. So the first one was called Kana, which is, I learned this is South African plant medicine. And then the next one was called, maybe it was like a hour later, we took the substance called white lily, which is this plant that grows in the Mediterranean and Middle East and I think parts of Asia. I don't know what that was, but it's just another plant medicine. And then we took these combinations, these edibles. The first 2 were like in pill form, but then we took these much bigger blocks of edibles that were ayahuasca and psilocybin mixed together, and they were, I think it was mixed with chocolate as well, so it was like a chocolatey taste to it. They actually tasted pretty good. And then we had 2 of those, but spread out a bit. So the thing is, I was familiar with some of the ayahuasca experience, but I didn't know those other substances. I never had them before, and I don't know how to separate out the psilocybin effect. I feel like what was different this time is when I looked at people during the experience, at some point their faces look really colorful, like extra brightness and color. I mean, there were like colored LED lights in the room, but these were like changing colors and stuff, whereas the LED lights were not shifting. So I knew it wasn't just the lighting in the room, and it was like different colors than the lamps in the room. And also it was like this, almost like these little energy trails going around their face, animating. Almost like a paisley pattern, but very thin strips of it, all going around their face, like little circles and, squiggly lines and stuff, just animating, across their face and around the edges and stuff. And that was really beautiful. It wasn't super intense, but it was definitely there when I looked at them. Like, wow, okay. And, even reaching out, and we were getting playful, and, we're very touchy. So we're touching people's face, each other's faces, and look at these cheeks and stuff. It's kind of fun doing that. But I don't know what the psilocybin or the other substances brought to it, because we took, 4 different things. When I would close my eyes, I would see these, colorful visuals, but it wasn't as intense as what I experienced in Costa Rica. And so I figured, okay, I know that ayahuasca can do that. And it was very similar, but just like lower intensity, like not as bright, and seemed a little more distant. But there's also, I was doing it differently with other people. So now I'm in the social space, and we're all hanging out, talking, being silly, playful. Some people I could tell were having more intense experiences and that they were acting extra silly and stuff. And, but the part that was really different was getting to have a conversation with people and asking some really deep questions. So I especially loved that because it made us so trusting of each other. We were able to share more intimacy, and it felt like everybody was really good friends. By the time we were done, like we're all very close with each other. So like one of the interesting questions I asked was, what is something that you wish people saw in you that they don't see? They don't normally see. And also, what is something you've never shared publicly before that you'd be willing to share now? And of course, we agreed to a cone of silence. Like we're not going to talk about the specifics of that with anyone else outside the group. But one question I really enjoyed asking some of the women in the group, which led to some fascinating answers, was, what's it like being a woman? And it's like in that state, they answered it from a spiritual perspective. Like, hey, I'm a spirit in a woman's body, and here's what it's really like being in a woman's body. And that was really fascinating to hear, and everyone gave different answers to that, but it was really, really beautiful just asking these kinds of deep questions. I remember when I threw out the first deep question, people were, somebody said like, "Oh, are we going there?" But then people liked it. They aligned with it because they wanted to hear other people's answers. They're like, "Yeah, I want to go there." And it was fun hearing the people, answer it and how they, how they answered it, because it wasn't like, it's like they were giving some deep thought to it, like grabbing my arm and saying, "Oh, I want to answer this. Let me think about it. I want to come up with a good answer to this." And then kind of like waiting for the words to flow through.
One of the cool things I find during psychedelic trips is it increases your awareness so much that you feel like you're channeling the universe through you, and that
Yeah.
the answers that come through they're kind of from you, but they're also not really from the avatar you, and they're coming from a deeper, wiser place. And so that's why I love, for example, mushrooms, because they give me so much insights and homework that I feel is coming from my higher self, or maybe the simulator. And it sounds like that's something that you guys experienced too on this
Yeah,
conversation.
the answers felt profound and wise. And what was really strange is, and this even carried over to the next day when we did sort of a group processing, some people were still feeling a little bit of the mild effect there. I would say I was like 95%, done with it, but still a little 5% effect maybe, the next morning, maybe just 2% by the end. But I was feeling a little something. But everybody's answers to questions and what we were talking about at the end seemed holographic. Like,
Ooh,
they were all,
holographic.
like we're all parts of each other. Like
Yeah.
everybody else is, sharing their lessons, their insights, their processing, their stories. I was like, that's all part of my past or present, not the details, but the general energy signature of it, the emotions they experienced going through it, how they framed it, the struggles they experienced, the challenges, insights. I was like, all of this means something to me. Either it connects with my past self. Like for some, some people were, I was like, oh, what they're describing here could be a solution to one of my current problems. For other people, it was like their current problem, I had solved that in my past 20 years ago. Like I lived through that. I know exactly what you feel. What you're describing, that is exactly how I felt when I was in the thick of that experience. And I could just relate to them. And I could see the solution because I'm like, I already solved that. I know how to solve that one. and then I would tell them, I would be like, I know how to solve that. I could share that with you. So it's so interesting because we could see, we were each other's problems and solutions all combined into one whole.
Oh, wow. So beautiful. Holographic is actually one word that came up for me during DMT as well.
Yeah.
More so visually. It's like it felt like I was looking at reality as if it was a hologram, and that I could see, or like a video game as well. I could see like the pixels of reality, and I could see that it was all like Minecraft pixels. It was all illusion. Um, but I love what you shared of like everyone is their own problem, and everyone in the group was the problem and the solution to each other's problems and solutions, and that perhaps all the characters in our simulation are sort of going through the same things, just on different timelines and different experiences, but the lessons or the qualia is somehow similar and runs parallel to your own life.
Yep. So like the big thing for me now is I just want to explore more in this space, but socially. I feel like I've reached the end of the road with doing it just as an individual, and that now is like a real opening up to the social space and just wanting to do more and more of this kind of exploration with people. Like even with more psychedelic journeying, which I'm definitely open to more of that. In fact, with the group I did with, we're talking about doing it again, maybe like, in a few months, even make it in a quarterly thing, perhaps. So, having more frequent journeys. I'm open to doing it with other people as long as, they're aligned and their energy, wants to do this for like discovering truth, positive ways. I'm not really into doing it just for the pure recreation of it. I want to learn and have insights and have growth experiences and connect with people in really interesting ways and just exploring more of the possibility space. And so, like putting that intention out there feels good to me. And also just like making it more of a social journey. Like we're all part of each other's reality. And what if we pool our energy and pool our intentionality? Can we create stronger, greater effects? Can we even create ripples in the world and, change the whole so-called outer reality? What more can we do to change and shift objective reality? One thing I really found interesting is like the USA election was kind of like stuck for a while. But then during this weekend experience, while I was having it, at least like the Senate thing got resolved. And it's like, oh, okay, the Democrats maintain control of the Senate. It's like, and I live in Nevada, that state that was like the tipping one. It's like, okay, now they have 50. So it's like interesting. Like I'm going to this peace and love experience and then like, oh, the Senate tips, while you're there. And it's like,
interesting.
Didn't know it till afterwards because we weren't using cell phones at any time during the experience. Nobody was checking in on their devices. So we're like in a news-free bubble during that time. But it makes me wonder how we can create, more of these more kinds of shifts in the world. Like, what happens if we try to bring an end to the war in Ukraine? What can we do that? Do we even think to try that? So maybe in our intention group, we'll try some things like that. We'll try creating more ripples. What we did try this past week that was different is in the first week, we mainly tried to create good luck for the people doing the experiment together, including the people watching it on the recording. But then we noticed there was a spillover effect and that even people who were not involved in the experiment were having luck or they hadn't got into it yet. Now they're already having luck or they're already having that butterfly sync. So this time we kind of opened it up to like, seeing that our intention is not just about us, that maybe is actually limiting it unnecessarily, setting an intention not only for ourselves as individuals and not only for everybody in the group, but for everything in reality beyond that. So the theme of our last call was all or nothing. Instead of seeing like you can set an intention just for yourself and not for other people, say it's all connected. You can't create good luck for yourself unless you create good luck for reality too. It's got to spill over. So we're intending the spillover effect. So with this opening up the possibility space, we've been intending it for everyone, everywhere. And I even mentioned the movie, which Rochelle and I saw recently called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And so that's the analogy you use. Intend this experience for everything, everywhere, everyone, everywhere, all at once.
It also makes sense from a holographic point of view, because if you intend it for one facet of the hologram, you must by default intend it for the entire hologram.
Absolutely. So that's why I'm thinking maybe it's a more accurate way of doing intentions. Don't see it as such an individual thing. Do it for everyone. And I remember when I was, back in doing this experiment with trying to manifest money, I did this thing called the $1 million experiment where we invited a bunch of people to try to intend manifesting $1 million for themselves and for everyone else doing the experiment. And people didn't make $1 million, but a lot of people in the experiment reported that we made, that they made money. And so lots and lots of money was made, including one person, I think that in the UK, they reported winning like £500,000 in the lottery there. So people were making some good money, and like money was flowing to me and my income tripled during that time or quadrupled during that time. It was like so much flow there. But it was interesting because we were just trying to create more money. It's like just for everybody. But now it's like not just the experimenters, but beyond. So then it makes us think differently about intentions. Like, what do we want to create as a change for all of reality? Ourselves, the people closest to us, everyone. that's a fun thing to explore with and see, because now you're getting really more aligned with the subjective reality model, and you're putting intentions into the dream world or into the simulation and seeing how the simulator responds to that level of intentionality. So that's, it's like peeling layers of an onion, where you start wondering, how much more can I handle? how much more do I want to try to step into this creator power space without being overly freaked that it works?
Yeah. It also purifies your intentions, because it's harder to set ego-based intentions when you're intending for the whole of reality.
Yeah, those end up sounding really stupid or lame. And then you realized, maybe I had that resistance all along, and that's why those things weren't showing up. Maybe when I intended competitive intentions, things that were good for me, but they don't do anything for anyone else. Maybe I actually created some guilt about that, or some resistance to that. And then we find, hey, when we intend goodness for ourselves and everyone else, there's less resistance there. Like, why do we have to resist that? It's good for me. It's good for everybody. Who would disagree with that? Like, if I intend good luck for you, do you want to resist that? You're like, hey, I'm on board with that. Sure. Give it to me. I'll take it. And so that's something I'm kind of leaning into and playing around with. Like, what are the intentions that I can intend for other people, where they're like, yes, I love that. Bring it. I'm aligned with that too.
One cool thing I thought it would be fun to do is, imagine if you could get a group of people all across the world doing one big mushroom trip or one ayahuasca journey at the same time. And imagine the amount of like energy and vibration levels if like we had, I don't know, 100,000 people all doing a mushroom trip at the same time all around the world. Like, I don't know what that would do to planet Earth.
I don't know either. Let's do it. We can at least intend it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. All we need is enough enclaves, enough people. I mean, maybe we start small, but we build up, and make it an annual thing, and like see if we can just keep growing it more and more. When I think of the experiences, in Costa Rica 3 years ago, or the recent experience this past weekend, and I think, if more people experience this kind of connectedness, love, seeing the web of energy that binds us all, there'd just be some things on the planet that we could probably just dissolve and let go of, like war, hatred, bigotry, racism. It's like, do we need that?
Yeah,
we don't need it. Maybe it's a phase we go through, but can we create a world without that? If so many people experience that, they would just see like that we just don't need this.
100%. Yeah, I mean, when you see people after an ayahuasca journey, how in tune they are, how connected they are, there's no world in which that person would even want to commit violence of any sort. And so that's part of the power of psychedelics, is they tune you back to your soul in a way that books and teachers don't do quite the same way, because on the psychedelic journey, it's just you and you. And so when you hear it from your higher self or source or Mother Aya, it hits you different than when it's someone else preaching it to you.
Yeah, totally.
And I do think if we could imagine if we get 1 billion people doing mushrooms regularly, it would change the world. Because how can there be violence if 1 billion people are constantly reconnecting with that energy and reconnecting with the flow and reconnecting with love and light and magic?
Yeah. The question is, would it work? I would think, yeah.
I'm going to start the mission. 1 billion humans. We're gonna do it.
Well, I'm in, so we'll start with 2.
Amazing. I love it. Steve, let's do a lightning round, and then we'll wrap up the episode.
Okay, lightning round, then we wrap up. Sounds good.
What's been the biggest lesson in your life this year?
Group intentionality, I would say. Yeah, set intentions not just for myself, but with and for other people and for everyone.
Love that.
Invite reality into the intentionality. Set intentions for reality with reality.
What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Kind of going to the future in your mind, like creating your own vision for the future, but doing it in a big picture sort of way, like not just pulling off a thin slice of it to hook into it, but actually understand as best you can what it would be like to actually be there, like body, mind, heart, spirit. So understand the physical side, the mental side, the emotional side, the spiritual side, if you can look at that, big picture there. Intend
Holographically.
that. Exactly. Intend the whole package.
Love that.
With goal setting too. Set the goal package across that spectrum. Don't only go only in the infrared zone and ignore the ultraviolet and so on.
Totally. What advice would you give to your younger self if you could go back and speak with him?
Don't worry, it's going to be okay. You'll be fine.
You'll be fine. I love that.
And most importantly, I would say stop resisting where you are. Just find life is so beautiful, you got to appreciate it, even when you think it sucks.
Appreciating where you are, no matter what.
Yep.
What do you most value in your friends?
Honesty. Yeah, and especially trust, willingness to share stuff about themselves. I have a lot of friends that share things with me they won't share with anyone else. I know things about all kinds of people that I won't share with the world. But then there's a part of me that also thinks, hey, the world already knows. It's all reality is connected. So, but yeah, I really value honesty. I love directness in communication. I know not everybody appreciates that, but I like when people just tell me how they feel, what they think. So, and of course, a lot more of that comes out with psychedelics, but people don't. Some people don't need that for that, for that level of depth and honesty.
Mm-hmm. What are you most grateful to have experienced in your life?
Women, really close, intimate connections with women. I love women, so that's probably the most fun. If I'm going to be honest,
Yeah. Well, you got to be honest.
Yep.
Who is someone that inspires you?
Well, Dr. Wayne Dyer really did. He passed away a while ago, but when he was alive, I got to see him speak in Las Vegas. I think it was around 2004. I went to one of Hay House's conferences, and he was talking about the power of intention. It was just so moving. And that was at a time where I was thinking about a career change, but I was still working in my computer games business. And I was I was sitting in the middle of this room of about 2,500 people watching him, and I was just moved to tears. And it wasn't so much by the words he was saying, it was by the group energy field I was in. And I realized it was like the energy he created in that space and all the people together working on their conscious growth and their spirituality. I was like, this is home for me. I've got to be a part of that. And it took me a while, but it was 6 months later, I finally started my blog and I started moving into that space. And, I felt when I was there, I'm like, I'm supposed to be doing that. I'm supposed to be that guy on that stage doing this kind of stuff. And the funny thing is that through a weird set of, invitations and synchronicities, I ended up speaking at that same conference, also in Vegas, but a different stage. And then again in Tampa. And because of that, I got to meet Dr. Wayne Dyer because at the speaker's dinner, since we were both speaking at the same event, I got to see him there. And, I asked Reed Tracy, who's the CEO of Hay House, if he could introduce me. And so he introduced me, and I, at least got to share that with Wayne, that he was one of the people that inspired me to get on this path. And it was just by him doing what he was meant to do. I think when we
his energy.
Yeah. But the people he brought together, to work on the spirituality. And one of the things I loved about seeing him speak is I saw him give a talk one time where he was just wearing a t-shirt and shorts and sandals, no formality needed, just get up there and speak. And I noticed he spoke off the cuff a lot and just, went with the flow of inspiration. And I thought, that's lovely. I always paid attention to speakers who seem like they're that over-rehearsed stage mannequin where they're doing the same kind of presentation for any audience. And I feel like there's no energy field that they're creating with us. It's like the audience is not even there. They're in their own headspace, doing their talk, doing their presentation. And it doesn't create nearly the same vibe as when the speaker is really present with the room and goes and creates the flow and the connection with the group energy. And then it's kind of an invitation for all of us to synchronize together. And so I always try to get more into the model of that second, type, that speaker who's trying to vibe with the group energy rather than being out of sync with it.
And you do it so well. I mean, I've been to your workshops, and yeah, it's a vibe.
It takes a lot of practice. Sometimes you got to go through the inauthentic stuff, I went through 6 years in Toastmasters to get used to, speaking, being in front of an audience. But then it's all about creating comfort with the space. Like when you get comfortable with the stage, then you can really be yourself and you could focus on the group energy.
So these days, if you were to recommend something to someone wanting to get into public speaking, would you recommend Toastmasters or to go another route?
Yeah, I still do, for as long as Toastmasters seems to be advancing you, as long as you're able to keep using that as a stepping stone. But don't get bogged down in the program for it. Like, I went through many of their manual speeches and so on and their projects, but after that I had to break away from it and realizing that's not going to be a path of growth for me. I did speech contests a few times, but then I realized that's not going to be a path of growth for me. After a while, then I have to go my own route.
Steve, what brings out your wild side?
That's a good question. What brings out my wild side? I would say invitations that require a bit of courage. I love leaning into a courage space. So the kind of stuff where I say, the question is like, do I really want to do this? And then a good question I learned to ask, that a friend taught me is ask, do I want the memory of doing it? And that helps me lean into the wild decisions more. Like, do I want them? We always get a memory. You get the memory of doing something or not doing something. So you get you get an invitation to do psychedelic stuff. And it's like, do you want the memory of having done it? Or do you not want the memory of having done it? So that's what helps me lean into, those wilder decisions more is like, do I want the memory of having done it or not? Make an invitation that I might get rejected. Okay. But I want the memory of having done it either way. I don't want to remember that I held back and didn't say anything.
What is your dream for the planet?
My dream for the planet would be for just everyone to feel this sense of persistent connection with everyone. For like people to move beyond that model of seeing ourselves all as separate competitive individuals, and for people to cooperate a whole heck of a lot more. And then I feel like if people could do that, we could solve all the kinds of problems, with the planet. Like we could solve the climate change issues and so on. I feel like all these problems we have are created by our competition and our separation as individuals. We, if everybody felt connected to everyone, we don't have to create wars or racism or sexism or so many other things. All the phobias that people create, all the separation they create, it just doesn't have to be necessary. And so there's multiple pathways there. Plant medicine might be one, opening your heart and trying to feel more compassion, forgiveness, practicing forgiveness is another. But creating like a oneness world where everybody sees everyone is like, we're all part of the same whole. That I think would be really beautiful.
One hologram.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is one piece of advice that you would like to leave the listener with on how they can lead a more epic life?
Intend it, set the intention. But start with an intention like a good one is, I want to see reality more accurately. Tell reality, show me more truth. And be willing to be courageous. And courage is something I think of not so much just as bravery, but more as heart alignment. Like when you're in a heart aligned space, you can do the things that will seem brave, but they don't require what feels like pushing through fear or pushing through bravery. What you do is you see beyond the illusion of fear. Like in my past self would see like inviting people to cuddle that I'm just meeting for the first time as that requires bravery. That requires courage. You're taking a risk. You're going to risk rejection. But when you see through the illusion of fear and the illusion of separation, it's very different. When you make invitations from that space, there's no need to be afraid and you just get yeses, because people receiving a fearless, loving invitation are more likely to say yes to it. Because like, who doesn't want that kind of invitation? When it's based in love and trust and it's consensual, then it's like, oh yeah, it's an easy yes. But when you're inviting from a fear and trying to push through the resistance, then you're going to get some rejection because people they don't want to interface with fear.
Ooh, that's powerful. People don't want to interface with fear. So having your intention come from love is the way through.
Mm-hmm. Take like a way I might say this piece of advice differently is take vibrational responsibility for what you're creating emotionally. Like don't allow yourself to wallow in anxiety more than you have to. Realize the anxiety is not just a result, you're partly creating that too. and realize you have more power than that. You don't have to create anxiety. And one of the ways you can move past creating fear, creating anxiety, worry, guilt, shame, and so on is to actually start appreciating it. Like start turning appreciation towards the fear. Say, I see the fear and I appreciate you. Thank you for signaling to me that I'm a little off balance here. Thank you for signaling to me that this is what I'm creating. Thank you for being honest with me. This feedback. It's like your emotional system is just telling you the truth. You're creating misalignment with your thinking, with your feelings, with your vibe, with the way you're framing reality. You're creating this experience of fear right now. You have that power. So reality is also inviting you. You don't have to use your power to make yourself powerless. You can use your power to open up more power, to open up more creativity.
When you've done these intentions of show me more truth or show me reality, show me more accuracy, what kind of things started happening for you?
Well, the objective story would shift, and it would shift in a way that will align with my intention. So if I intended more financial abundance, then suddenly new business opportunities start coming up, new sources of money start flowing through, things shift. My website gets more traffic and so on. I get ideas for things. But when I would try to make the money directly, misalignments would happen. So I've often found like reality loves when we lean towards growth experiences. So don't just ask for more truth, because seeing more truth is a growth experience. So ask for the whole package. Ask for, I want to see more truth. I want to grow by seeing more truth. I want to even go through the experience of feeling a bit freaked out and processing it and accepting, okay, there's a new level of acceptance here. This is how reality works. I want to step into my power. Ask for all of that together. It's all part of it. When I would write blog posts and things, I learned with my writing journey, it always has to be like aligned with growth for me. I will feel very checked out and not feel very inspired when I'm trying to write stuff that is no longer a growth experience for me. Like if I write stuff I know 100% well, just to be a benefit to other people, that's not enough. It's like anti-holographic, right? Because how can I create a growth experience for others if I'm not creating a growth experience for me? So I've learned that whatever I do in life and business, if I'm trying to make something that's a growth experience for my audience, but not for me, or it's a growth experience for me, but not for my audience, it does not work. I can't get the motivation to do it. It doesn't work. So like when I would try to create a course on my own, and then with the intention I'll launch it later when it's done, it doesn't work. There's some out of sync thing there. So I learned I could actually have great success by launching a course before I create it. So I describe the course, I bounce the idea off people in my audience, I create the launch date for it, and I say, we're going to launch it here. But then I say, we're going to create 30 lessons or 60 lessons or whatever after people sign up for it. Then I co-create it with them, and we're sort of creating it together. And I think I get inspired ideas for, okay, let's create lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3 as we go. And then I'll do something like create 30 lessons in 30 days or 60 lessons in 60 days. I don't always want that kind of intensity now. But like, our last course was called Guild, and it was a 3-hour Zoom call every day for 30 days in a row. So it's like 90 days of, Zoom calls in a month, 30 days in a row, including weekends, just like every day, 3 hours. Let's work on our social skills was the theme of the course. So, like the intensity of creativity can be just like flow and flow and flow if you're making it a growth experience for you and for the audience.
I love that.
So that's what I learned about creativity is like create for people. Don't just create in a void. Don't focus on the content. Always create for someone or something. And I realized that makes sense holographically because the content, the people, we're all connected. There's not separate content and then people, customers. No, content and people are the same thing.
Ooh, okay. I see.
There's no writing without people. There's no, like when I write, it's the energy of the people who read it that flows through me, that gets the writing done. Like, even past and future, they overlap.
There's no podcast without the listeners.
Absolutely. Like, would you be creating this? Would you have as much motivation to do it without anyone to listen to it?
I would still enjoy it, but it wouldn't be quite
the
same. Yeah. Yeah.
And I can feel their energy too. Like as I'm talking to you, I can feel the energy of the people who will listen to this eventually. Yeah. And hello, listeners. Hope you're enjoying it.
They are.
I'm impressed you listened to all this, but good for you. I hope you liked it because we're creating this for you, with you. In fact, it's even their intentional energy that's making us do this in their past. It's inviting us into that.
Yeah, isn't that a trippy thought? Some
It's
of
like it
their
already exists.
intentions might
Yeah.
be influencing our conversation right now.
Yep.
Wow. Steve, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation. Where can people find you if they want to vibe with you or connect with your courses around subjective reality, abundance, all that sort of good stuff?
Absolutely. So my website's the best place to interact. It's stevepavlina.com. And if you really want to get into my space more closely, we have a group called Conscious Growth Club. We open it for new membership once a year. At this point, it's always the last week of April each year. We invite people in, dozens of people get involved in that. And it's like a 1-year coaching program. You get access to all our courses and such. And it's a community support program. We have a forum, a bunch of people connect and meet up in person. And that's basically like our intensive community space where we all, love each other, care for each other, encourage the heck out of each other, and we grow together.
And where everyone gets lucky through group intention.
Yep, absolutely.
Steve, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
For me too. Thanks so much, James.